Committee. I'm Fiona Robertson, the Chair of the Area Committee and also one of the councillors for Tain and Easter Ross. So thank you everyone for coming along, and particularly officers and from agencies out with Highland Council to report to us. We really appreciate you doing that. A few housekeeping: if you could make sure that your mics are muted when you're not speaking, and if you can keep your camera activated, that would be very helpful, particularly when you're speaking. If you want to raise a point, if you could raise your electronic hand. If for whatever reason I don't see it, sometimes they don't work or I miss it, then please feel free to just shout out and I will include you on the list of people to speak. The meeting, as I said, it's been recorded and it'll be available for archiving for the public. First, I'd like to ask your permission, everyone, if I could rearrange the agenda. The Inverness City Committee is on at the same time today, so some of the officers that we have here also need to go to that committee and speak. So if we could rearrange it, that we would have after the police report, so that will still stay as number 3, Chris, you'll be relieved to know. We'll keep that on there. But if we could move item 6, which is the place-based investment funds, to item number 4. And if we could then move the roads item, which is number 7, to number 5 to follow on from that. Helen?
A minor thing, it's actually item 5 that Alan Webster's presenting. That's the place-based investment programme.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
It's me doing the other one, and
I'm doing 6. Okay, so item 5 will become item 4 after the police report for Alan Webster to enable him to go to Inverness. And then item 7, which is the roads, will become item 5. Is that okay with everyone? You're quite happy for me to do that? That's great, thank you. Okay, so we'll move to item number 1, which is apologies for absence. Fiona?
Morning, Chair. I don't have any apologies apart from Councillor Monroe, who's obviously going to join us soon. I'll do a quick roll call. Councillor Finlayson?
Yes.
I see you're here, yeah. Councillor Loudon?
Present, sorry.
That's okay. And Councillor Monroe's hopefully going to join us. Councillor Rind?
Here, thank you.
Chair, Councillor Robson, I see you're here. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, here.
And Councillor Wilson, I don't think...
Councillor Wilson did send apologies. Sorry, I thought I'd sent them on to you yesterday, Fiona, okay. But Councillor Wilson does send apologies.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, that's great. Okay, thank you, Fiona. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything to declare? Or has there been anything in advance of the meeting, Fiona?
I haven't received anything in advance.
Okay. Sorry, I'm pretty certain I did.
Eric?
I did submit one in advance.
Oh, gosh.
Certain I did.
Sorry about that if I've missed that.
It's.
You could just give it again, Derek, if that's okay.
It's a place-based investment programme, as I'm a director of Tain Heritage Trust, and that's one of the 2 organisations looking for investment. So clearly I have an interest to declare and will leave the meeting at that point and come back after the item's been concluded.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm doing many apologies that you did send that in advance. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thanks, Derek. Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, which is the police report, the area performance summary report, which is on pages 1 to 31 of your papers. And I'm delighted to welcome for the first time to our meeting Inspector Chris Murray. It's very nice to meet you, Chris. You may have met 1 or 2 of us already. We look forward to coming to a meeting in our ward. I know Helen's talked about arranging that, so that would be good, where we can speak to you on a much more sort of individual basis. But we're very grateful for you coming along and look forward to your report this morning.
Yeah, morning. Thank you. Yeah, as I say, I've been in post here since November, so still finding my feet, but covering this for Kevin this morning. But yeah, happy to attend the local meetings as well. Just give me a shout. the report is, as you've seen there, is for you all to read. I'll not bore you by going through it word for word. Probably just to highlight this over the year there. There's, you know, we're still dealing with coming out of lockdown or getting to a new normal, if you like, and how crime has changed in our areas as a result of that. Overall, things are down. Crime is down, but that's perhaps in some areas as a result of lockdown restrictions around licensed premises, for example, has reduced a bit of antisocial behaviour and some of the more minor assaults. And I think that'll be partly down to some of the restrictions that have been imposed with licensed premises. One that we've got a bit of a focus on the report, you'll see there under acquisitive crime, is fraud, and that's just as a real change in behaviour from people that are doing a lot more online shopping now. There's a lot more people at home, again as a result of restrictions, and I've got to or coming to grips with using online stuff. That sort of links into the sort of vulnerable people, and they are still being targeted, and we are still driving that message out there around vulnerable people getting targeted for online scams or to transfer money, and we're kind of working with the banks around the banking protocol and schemes like that to try and reduce that. But it's a constant message, and I think in our area in Easter Ross here we have a lot that perhaps fall into that category, who are vulnerable and who are remote and are using that online system and are being targeted. So we're doing a lot of work around that. Probably just to touch on it, I see at the back end of the report, maybe one that you might find a bit of a concern would be a significant increase in the rapes reported. But having looked at that more closely, a large part of that is historical stuff that's just as a result of increased sort of confidence, I suppose, in coming forward. It's quite a traumatic thing to deal with and to come forward around. So some of that has been, well, as I say, a large percentage of that is historical stuff and has not occurred in this year but has been reported in this year. And some of it is around us proactively approaching individuals having identified suspects or accused for these offences. Is there any questions around the report? As I say, I don't intend to just read it out. Wherever you've probably all had a look through it, and if there's anything that you want to ask me around, feel free. I see Pauline's come in now, so she's bound to ask me something. But any questions around it, I'm happy to say. And obviously COP26 we got through as well, and that was a bit of a bit of an abstraction on officers in Easter Ross as well. But hopefully we've maintained a business as usual service as well. But
great. Okay. Thank you, Chris. That's great. Yeah, we have a couple of hands up. I'll also add in a couple of questions here at the beginning. I noticed in the report that levels of vandalism, and you also said that, have gone down, which you would expect with COVID. However, in Tain, we do experience a lot of vandalism in the Rose Garden with a lot of the youngsters, because they've got nothing to do, because the activities that they were on before haven't been on, and they find themselves bored and they hang about the high street. We've had the toilets vandalised really badly during COVID, not for the first time. We've had all significant damage done to the Rose Garden as well. People complained a lot, and we have raised all these incidences with the police. We have spoken to the school, multi-agency meetings we've had, but it still continues to be an issue, which obviously is not reflected at all in your report. So that's disappointing, because it is a major issue for us, and it's raised a lot. So that's one. And just the other thing is on the looked after children.
Yep.
We've got very high figures there of missing children. I was just wondering how these figures compare with other areas. In some statistics you do give us, comparisons. In this you don't, with other areas. In Scotland wide, just is this a sort of fairly regular occurrence? Is it a one-off? If you could explain that a bit more, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, on the Rose Gardens, I'm aware of the ongoing issues around for youth, not only in Tain but across the Easter Ross area, and the lack of youth clubs or youth facilities, probably around COVID. And there's work ongoing with getting facilities open. Around Tain, there's an officer being dedicated to that now, who's working with the head Master in Tane Royal Academy, Claire Gardner, has been tasked with that, and I know that she's been doing a lot of work around youths and around diverting them from this sort of activity and the impact it has. It's not reflected in the report because we don't get many calls from the public around it. Unfortunately, you know, we don't get calls about when it's happening. It's always after, and it's you know we are directing patrols into the area, but when they patrol, sometimes they'll be there, sometimes there'll not be anybody there. You know, it's difficult to tie down the times. But there's only one resident that's phoned in that's nearby that I'm aware of, and it's getting that individuals at key times. As I've spoken to the local councillors before, and I'm quite happy if we can identify children that are there and are causing issues. That, you know, I'll write to their parents if that would have an impact or a positive, you know, effect on diverting them from hanging around there. But it's getting that message out to the kids about how it's impacting the elderly people around about that area and the community as a whole for the damage that's happening in the garden, and is there something we could do to address that? But that's work that's ongoing. Yeah, so it's with the school. It's definitely on my radar, so it's not. Please don't think it's forgotten about or it's not been looked at. As I say, I've dedicated an officer specifically to it, which and I know she's done a lot of work on it with the school. Around the looked after children, that's absolutely yeah. I do see that there's an increase in missing people from looked after children. We're lucky in this area that we don't have many residential homes. Whereas if you were to take that from my experiences elsewhere, we have a lot of missing people from looked after homes or residential premises because they'll go out together and the residential premises will have a time of you have to be back in by 9:30. These kids are not going to come back in at 9:30. They're going to come in at midnight or 1 o'clock, and they'll be reported missing because the protocol of the care home or the residential premises is that they will phone the police and report them missing if they're not in by 10 o'clock. So we are tied up and we are abstracted with that, and we do have to record that, and some work goes into dealing with them. There are a couple of individuals locally that's been ongoing with, and I've been in discussion with social work and with regards to them, and there's been a bit of work carried out with the children and with the homes around their protocols and whatnot. But that is definitely, I would say, consistent with the national picture. In any area or beat where there's a residential premises with looked after children, it's the process that they have to phone the police if they're not in by their time. But they're kids who are 15, 16, 13, 14 who want to be out till 10, 11 o'clock on Friday and Saturday night. And the challenge is we have to then go and trace them, bring them home or bring them to the home. But it's not that they're missing, but they are looked after children and they're vulnerable, and it's about, you know, identifying that and also highlighting it to our County Lines group team who are making sure they're not getting taken advantage of. But you know, and they are just out with their mates basically. But we are obviously addressing any vulnerabilities that they're potentially getting involved in.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think it would be a good idea if we were to meet with Claire Gardner in our ward, in the Tane and Easter Ross ward, and she could update us on the work that she's been doing. So maybe she could get in touch with Helen, and Helen will invite her along to a ward business meeting or a separate meeting. That'd be good. Thank you. I'll move on to those who've got their hands up. Derek, you're first.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks, Chris, for the report. And yeah, there were a few things I picked up. Page 4 of your report, page 7 of ours, down the bottom, just there's a number of hate crimes. It's increased by 400%. It's a very low number. It's gone from 1 to 5. But just I wonder if there was any sort of background to that. Page 5 of your report and 8 of ours. over the last reporting year in Easter Ross, offences in relation to the supply of drugs have reduced by 63.4%. I'm assuming that that isn't really a reduction in drug use by 63.4%. It's just the number of crimes detected has gone down. And I understand, you know, the issues regarding corroboration in taking action there. And I know that, you know, certainly in one of our communities, it's a concern in particular to that community, and that's probably one that you've spent some time in yourself over the last month or so. So just if you had any comments on that. Operation Close Pass. So on page 7 of your report and 10 of our papers. I wondered, you know, maybe we could try and publicise that today, Fiona, if that was just in terms of how you overtake a bicycle and how much space you're supposed to give them, and the changes in the highway code as well. That in that regard, you know, I think all of us could do with a reminder from time to time. And last one, I'd also picked up on the looked after children, and I'm glad to hear you reference the County Lines team when you were commenting on that, because that is it's a real concern for all of us, I think. I'm done at that.
Perfect. I'll try and go through. Yeah, the hate crime incidents. I don't have specifics on what's caused that that increase, but obviously we'll record it as a hate crime if there's an aggravation factor. So there are low numbers, and I would need to get a bit more from the analyst about what the circumstances were for these three. Don't have a facility to search those, but it is one more than the 5-year average, but it's 4 more than last year. But I wonder if last year it's reduced because pubs were shut, people weren't drunk and falling out in the pubs. So yeah, it's difficult to analyse the figures. There's two. You know, it's normally before COVID we could probably do quite a good analysis year on year, but it's more difficult just now till we get back to a normal. Yeah, and the drug supply of drugs, yeah, is absolutely. It doesn't mean that drug use has gone down. It's still a massive issue within the community, and we're working with partner agencies, you know, all the time around it. The County Lines team, as you're aware, is up and running now, and we are targeting those groups that are trying to come into the communities in the north and take advantage of vulnerable people to supply their drugs. So we're constantly doing that, and we meet, or I meet, and one of my officers meets weekly with Safer Sutherland and Safer Easter or Safer Rossshire. So we meet with housing, with NHS, and we discuss the calls from the previous week around vulnerabilities and you know, people being taken advantage of, potentially mental health issues, and try and get that partnership to engage, and it has been really successful. And that's whether that's been around having an individual moved from an address because they are being taken advantage there and getting them set up somewhere else, so it's a fresh start for them. That's been successful even in the short time I've been here. Close Pass, absolutely. I've come from just about 14 years of road policing, so Close Pass, I would agree with you. It's something we do need to highlight, and there is that new change in the legislation that's come out now around the highway code and the rules around that. So definitely keen to promote Close Pass and the elderly driver scheme around our area. That's two that are key for us. And yes, as I say, we've highlighted the looked after children and how that's been monitored, and yeah, we'll get clear to come to local meeting.
Great, thank you, Chris. We have Duncan here from the press office, so perhaps we could chat after the meeting and put together some sort of press release looking around the closed paths, and say that we have highlighted it and get some information out there. So
Absolutely,
thanks Derek for raising that. Okay, next we have Maxine Smith.
Thank you, Fiona. Hi, Chris. We haven't met yet. Just a couple of things that are not are more sort of generalistic I want to ask you about. The drugs. So obviously when we see reports, it tends to be not same old, but very much on an even keel every single time. And I think, understanding what happens is once you catch one dealer, another one appears. And so really you kind of always firefighting. And I just wonder if that is the case, that you kind of see that it basically is the same. It doesn't really get any worse, or maybe you have peaks and troughs. I just wondered. But also I want to talk to you about something that's not on your list, and that's cybercrime. Now I've noticed I do a lot of social media, and that's how my constituents contact me, and I know some others of us do in this room. And since COVID, especially this last year, I've noticed an increase in cloning, in hacking, and all this kind of thing on social media, especially Facebook. I've also caused to know that there is quite a bit of cyber stalking going on. And I was speaking to former Inspector Matthew Rees, who's now a councillor, a few weeks ago, and he said this is something that you now take really seriously, and you can look into it. You have the knowledge and the technology to actually trace people, track people's ISPs, etc. I had cause to get the IT department in Highland Council to try and trace some abusive emails that I was getting from the same Hotmail account that I understand was fake. But they were unable to do so because they could trace it as far as the Microsoft website that was used, but then they would have needed police to ask Microsoft to divulge their identity. So I wonder how serious you take it, and also because I know there are new laws, and I wonder if you in Highland have the technology to deal with it, because I know many years ago it would have to go to Glasgow. So I just wondered where you are with that. Thank you.
Okay, certainly the first one around the drug use. Yeah, unfortunately, there's always somebody willing to step into someone's shoes and try and earn some money to deal locally, and that's where there's a lot of work getting done around county lines. That's probably the biggest trend we're seeing is trying to get around vulnerable people to deal for them. So it's about monitoring these individuals that come into the area, and there's certainly been some sort of successes around that, but it's a constant fight. I think it's and yeah. What do we do? I think the new approach or probably the better approach that we've got now is that we are identifying individuals who are likely to be used by them and trying to engage with them first, or identify them early before they're committed to it, and making it really difficult for county lines to get a foot here like they've got a foot in other areas. So there's a lot of work going on around it, but yeah, it's still ongoing, and yeah, the figures are always much the same. But I would have to say, given the amount of drugs and different drugs out there, I think we're doing well at that, and we're not seeing a big increase, and we're thankfully not seeing massive drug deaths here in Easter Ross or Sutherland. That as I say, I've come from elsewhere, and I previously worked in Dundee, and it's always perhaps been associated with drugs, but you'd have individuals who would be found slumped in this outside the shop in the high street with a needle, and that's just like it's a real battle. But thankfully we don't have that sort of level here, but it's probably more around the sort of cannabis and cocaine. But a big part of that, identifying individuals who use that now, is the new technology from road policing around the drug driving test kits. So we are identifying more, and we're probably getting an increase in detections of users of cocaine and cannabis, because if they're found driving and potentially under the influence, they'll generally have a bit of possession on them as well. So that's perhaps increasing the figures around possession, because we have got that better technology to identify those drivers, and a significant amount of drug drivers have been identified since it started a couple of years ago now. Cybercrime absolutely is taken seriously, and it's still based in Glasgow. Gartcosh is still probably the home of our cybercrime units, and that's who we kind of direct our stuff to. And unfortunately, there is work going on, but it's a massive challenge to get to IP addresses sometimes, or get things from other agencies like Amazon and Microsoft to disclose data to us, and you know they perhaps quote data protection and such like, but it's a real challenge. It's not a straightforward inquiry, and it does require those specialist officers that are trained in it, and hopefully and they're building up links with large organizations, but you know, they can be based worldwide, like Amazon's based in America, and it's like their rules are different and what they disclose is different, and it is difficult around it, but we do deal with them. And recently there was one in Dingwall around the MSP there, the MP, getting emails and getting phone calls from an individual, and we were able to trace that to the Manchester area, so it was dealt with, you know. So and the Met were involved in that because they obviously are at Parliament as well, so it can be done, but it's getting that partners to engage with us. But yeah, it's not a quick process, but it does happen, and yeah, absolutely, and should be no fear about reporting it. You know, locally here, because still we will get the same. Just because it's based in Gartcosh, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't get the same service that the City of Glasgow gets as Invergordon or Tain or Dornoch or whoever gets. They should get the same service from Gartcosh as Glasgow or Edinburgh or any other city. So yeah, we shouldn't be a fear about reporting that sort of offence.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Pauline, you're next.
Oh, she doesn't want to say anything. Fine.
Sorry, Chris. You know, fine. I'm not going to sit here and say nothing. Anyway, firstly, everything really that I had on my radar has been talked about, so thank you for that. The drug thing, as you know, is a major issue for us, but I have to say that we have had a few local successes, so that should give everybody else a bit of, you know, hope that it'll happen in their area too, because I mean, it's taken a long time for the ones that we know of locally, and it's, you know, there's a lot of happy people around just now for that, so thank you. The other thing I would like to thank Christopher, is that he's helped me a lot locally with some young mums and different things, and he's been a great support to them all. He's contacted them personally and everything, so I just want to say thank you for that. The other thing that I had on my radar was looked after kids, but you know, same old, not same old. I don't mean it in that, don't mean to disrespect it, but yeah, we all know the trouble that causes, and we do have that issue, as you know, ourselves locally. And the problem is because they are in these homes in Inverness, somebody's picking them up and bringing them through to Allness, so it's taking hours for them to find them, and by the time the police come out, report it. It's the logistics of it as well that people forget, the distances in the Highlands a bit. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much for the report, and I'll probably be annoying you soon.
No problem. Thank you. I'm glad it's helped.
Okay, and Mike.
Yeah, thank you for your report, Chris, and I've already passed on my congratulations to the speedy response to the recent break-in at the church at Everington, and I'm really pleased to see and congratulate you on the arrests that you've made recently. You seem to be acting very, very quickly and well with regard to what's going on. I remember going back a few years now in the Community Council in Everington, and the police report used to come up. I think we were really classed as a bit like Sleepy Hollow, you know, we're very, very little going on, thankfully, but it's increasing enormously since then. We rely quite a bit on the We Are Everton side. Now, you're talking about people not reporting things, but maybe they're actually going on to these sites and hoping that we'll pick it up or whatever, you know. But there was one incident in Everton the other night, apparently about 10 o'clock in the evening, where an elderly lady was accosted going into the co-op shop by somebody demanding money off her. And you know, there's things like that going on now that we'd never experienced before, really. So I think it would be a good idea if Claire could come to our next ward meeting as well as the Easter Ross one. That would be good for us to air a few of these items. And we do thank Michael for his Michael Galley for his good attention to the area. He does really well there. And so it's just this. I know you can't be everywhere, and you know, when crime starts to increase, even, you know, in a smallish sort of way, in comparison to maybe other areas, people start saying, "Oh, I wish we had our police station open again." And this was highlighted in the newspapers recently, whereby, you know, we're talking about police numbers and stuff like that. And we do miss our policeman, who was really involved in community works as well. And that's an area I think that the police are maybe could pick up on if we did manage to get the police station open again. But I know that's a long, long way away, where things are. But anyway, thanks anyway, Chris. And we just wanted to air these one or two items. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would love more officers in my area to do a lot more proactive stuff. You know, it's we can, yeah, I would love more officers. That's the long and short of my answer. But it's above my pay grade about how many officers I get. You know, and I suppose that with the increase in frauds, you know, there's a lot more behind closed doors crime, and I suppose they do try and make sure that we're addressing that as well. Yeah, no, and the church thing, as we've highlighted there, that was probably a significant across Sutherland, Easter Ross, and into Caithness even. But an individual has been identified, and there's a bit of work. And as I say, he's in custody on remand at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And final hand, Alistair Rind.
Thank you. Can I just ask about staffing? What are the staffing levels, for example, in Tain Police Station at this moment in time?
So, Tain's been a focus of mine since I started in November to increase the officers starting and finishing in Tain. So Tain should have 2 officers on each team in Tain. So there should be 2 officers based in Tain on each team on a 24-hour basis.
Well, at least we thank you for your honesty about that, because we always get the impression from your senior officers that everything's hanky-dory as far as police numbers are concerned. But when you actually speak to the officers on the street, or when you're out with them anywhere and that kind of thing, and they tell us, well, it's only 2 of us covering from Helmsdale down to the Cromarty Bridge, it's quite worrying, really, for knowing that we don't have a police presence in our community. Many times when you go up to the police station, you can't get anybody now. But I mean, it used to be in the good old days, we'll call them, 4 police officers and a sergeant on each shift. But that's long gone. Anyway, we thank you for clarity on that matter. Thank you.
No problem. Just in addition to that, there is Golspie officers based in Golspie as well. But yeah, I grew up in Dornoch, and I'm all too aware of the stations in Sutherland and roundabout that are no longer there, and the restructuring in numbers. But yeah, that's the position we're in.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you for addressing all the questions. That's been a good discussion. And again, thank you for coming along, and we look forward to seeing you at our individual ward meetings in the future.
No problem.
Thank you.
Helen could just feel free to invite me, and I'll certainly accept them.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye. Bye. Okay, members, item number 4, which is number 5 on the agenda, the place-based investment programme. That's on supplementary papers, pages 1 to 37 on your additional papers. And Alan Webster, the Principal Regeneration Officer, is here to talk on that. There's 9 recommendations, which I'll go through at the end. I'll just go through them each one.
I think this is the one that I'm supposed to leave the meeting, Fiona. So
okay,
if somebody can give me a call to come back in at the end of the item, I'd be very grateful. Okay,
Helen or Fiona, I'll do that. Okay, thanks, Derek. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Alan.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, members. Really appreciate you taking this item earlier as well. It's very helpful indeed. Just to recap, the Scottish Government has allocated the Council just under 2 million ring-fenced place-based investment programme. It's a 5-year programme, but the grant award is only for this single year, 21-22. You'll recollect that on the 1st of September last year, members of the E&I Committee agreed an area distribution of the grant, as we did previously with the Town Centre Fund. And that was using the same calculation that the Scottish Government used to distribute the grant across Scotland to all 32 local authorities. This resulted in Easter Ross Area Committee being allocated £280,155. You'll recollect early in November, members, that at a joint ward business meeting, you discussed options how to invest the place-based investment programme, and there was a desire to support established local priorities identified by members, and also supporting existing town centre fund projects if they required an uplifting grant. You also expressed a desire at that time to divide the area allocation equally between the two wards, again as you did with the town centre fund, and asked officers to bring projects to the next available committee. So I hope that this paper meets those expectations. I don't propose to refer to sections 3, 4, 5 and 6 of the report. That's the background and the objectives of the fund. We've discussed that at great length at ward business meetings and also written notes. So I'd like to just move straight to section 7, members, which is the proposals themselves. The first one being the Shore Road lay-by project in Invergordon. This is an existing live TCF project. You'll remember going back a year ago, ERA committee at that time approved a £50,000 TCF investment to provide 2 lay-bys. All the preparatory work has now been carried out. The council has awarded the contract, but there's a very small budget shortfall of 2,887.64 pence to be precise. So one of the recommendations is to use a bit of the place-based investment programme to absorb that projected overspend. Turning to 7.2, this is CCTV support in Alness. Again, a very straightforward project, members. It's been encouraged by the ward members itself. It's the installation of a modern digital CCTV system to provide coverage in Alness Town Centre. The estimated cost is £30,000. I should have said that all the proposals before you are appended in detail in Appendix 1. The project is capital in nature, it fits the objectives of the fund and can be awarded by March 22, so no issues there. 7.3, exactly the same again, a slightly more expensive project at £35,000, but this time for Invergordon Town Centre. So again, no issues with that project whatsoever. Then we move to 7.4, which is the new public convenience provision in Evington. The Community Trust there are looking for £40,000 towards a £72,000 project to provide public toilet facilities in the village. So 7.4 explains precisely the full scope of works there. There's no issues in terms of being eligible. There is a risk with this one in terms of the match funding is not in place, and the anticipated contract award date is after the 31st of March, which is one of the requirements as I outlined regarding the grant. However, as we're seeing across Highland, there are a number of projects being approved that also are looking at contract award dates beyond March. The mood of members elsewhere is that the very best projects that deliver for Highland communities should be selected for investment, as opposed to those that satisfy that deadline. And back in September, E&I committee also recognised that and said that the council should write to the Scottish Government. It was agreed that the council would write to the Scottish Government seeking flexibility. Now, we've had informal discussions and those have been positive. We will now follow that up formally, given that we're now in this round of area committees and we're seeing quite a volume of projects that are facing this challenge. So we can now provide something tangible to illustrate the point to the Scottish Government. So we will be doing that. And the final proposal in this particular ward is in 7.5 is the Tyndallen play area in Evington. Again, a very straightforward project. Basically, new play equipment in there at a cost of just under £15,000. The full proposal is in Appendix 1. Again, no issue with the project whatsoever. It's capital in nature. It fits the objectives. All the criteria are met, and the contract should be awarded by March. So no issues there. Turn to Section 8, which is the Ward 7 proposals. We have a choice of 2 members, the first being Tain Picture House. They have requested 140,000 to carry out a further phase of works to the Picture House. There are a number of work packages contained within the bid. The total cost of the project, if you take the combined package of works, it comes in at 195,000. But essentially, the project can be scaled back or up or down to accommodate any value of grant awarded there. In terms of eligibility, no issue with that project, members. You've already awarded Town Centre Fund money in the past, so it's no surprise that Town Centre renewal is a key priority for this project and satisfies that objective. The grant should be committed by the end of March if members were hoping to award funds, so there's no issues with that one. The second project is Tain Streetscape renewal. Again, this is a council-led project at a cost of £140,000 to supplement, well, the total estimated cost of the project is 175. So this is footpath improvements to basically complement the planned street lighting improvements on the High Street in Tain. The full detail, again, is appended to the report. It's capital in nature, no issue. The match funding is in place. The risk with this particular project is, again, the award dates after 31st of March. It probably doesn't come as a surprise, we're sitting here on the 17th of February, we're going to be confronted with this challenge of committing all funds. And as I say, we are writing to the Scottish Government to seek flexibility in that regard. Section 9, this was a requirement that E&I committee laid down, that when members were considering their investment decisions, that they should take account of the community plan and partnership in their decision-making process. I've said a verbal update will be provided by the board manager. So if you don't object, Chair, could I just bring in the board manager, Helen Ross, just to make a small comment at this point?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And the local community planning partnership, we're actually between chairs at the moment, so they haven't met specifically to consider these proposals. But certainly all the different proposals that have been outlined, they do align with the main partnership aims, which are really around the importance of a vibrant local economy and promotion of tourism, etc. And I'm actually chair of the subgroup, the Health and Wellbeing Group, and there's strong aims around increasing good mental health and well-being, strong and safe communities. And so all of these projects contribute in some ways, and often in more than one way, to these kind of aims. So very much in alignment with the partnerships aims and objectives.
Thanks very much, Helen. And just finally, members, the final section of the report. If members are minded to split the fund per the 2 wards as was hoped, and the members are minded to approve the Ward 6 proposals, it will result in a £17,000 sum of money for Ward 6 left to be committed. Now, what I'm proposing there is that that's held as a contingency in the event that any of the projects require additional support. Given that the expectation is that the grant is committed by the end of March, I'm also recommending that delegated authority be granted to Malcolm MacLeod, and in consultation with the committee chair, to allocate any of that uncommitted grant. If a contingency sum is not required, again, we'll simply ask permission from the Scottish Government to roll that forward into 22-23. So that concludes all I have to say, Chair.
Great, thank you, Alan. Thank you for the detail on that. I have Maxine Smith first.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alan. I agree with the splitting of 50-50, and when it comes to Tain East Ross deciding what it wants to spend the money on, I'll listen to the debate and see if there's anything we need to add. But obviously, I tend to take a steer from what the ward itself wants. With regard to the Shore Road project, that's been ongoing for some time. It's started. It's actually physically started now this week, which is excellent to see. Before the ships come in and the coaches get in people's way on the High Street. I spoke to Shane Manning yesterday in traffic enforcement, and he's going to do his bit with the yellow lines down on King Street, and also burning off the white lines that were put previously for other years for the coaches to park. So that's all on its way. With regards to CCTV, we've been lobbied for quite a while now to get CCTV in Allness, in the High Street and surrounding areas, and I'm really, really pleased to see that we can actually do it with this fund. and we can also extend the Invergordon and upgrade it to newer digital information technology. And as for the toilets in Evington, wanted to do that again for a long time, and I'm pretty sure we will get match funding for that. And any of the other projects, yeah, fully support. Yeah, happy to give you, well, Malcolm McLeod delegated authority to spend the 17.5 on what's required, as long as it's in Ward 6, of course. If it isn't, then just carry it forward. If perchance you can't carry it forward, then local members will have an emergency meeting to find something to spend it on, so don't worry. So yeah, just want to say in general, absolutely really welcome this fund and the other funds that are coming forward. It's been a source of frustration for me for 14 years that I've been a councillor, nearly 15, that there are many things we would like to do but can't do, because either we don't have a community group to take them forward, or we don't have pots of money. So this is really exciting for me, and I'm really pleased to see it. And thank you for all your ongoing work, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Next, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Alan, for all your work. And as Maxine said, we agreed to the 50-50 split, and we'll listen to the debates for either for both wards, see what's what. With regard to I want to speak about the Evington toilets one. I raised the issue at the Community Council in Edmonton with regard to match funding, and they actually agreed that they would spend up to 30,000 on that project. So I don't know if that makes it to be a match funding thing or not, but I think the Edmonton Community Trust who have applied, I noticed in the report they said they would find the 2,000 or whatever it would be, but if there is that 17,000 in there, it might well be able to tap into that just a little bit. Now, with regard to, there was one part of the application which I felt was quite an important part, but hasn't been included. It's the recharging points at where the toilet is going to be, but we have agreed that that will go in for a phase 2. Just to be able to fit it in. So look forward to that, maybe trying to get that in next year to the phase 2. But apart from that, it's fine. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Pauline.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan, for all the hard work. It's been amazing. Absolutely delighted, of course, for the CCTV, because as Maxine quite rightly said, we have been asked so many times and we just never could find the money, or for whatever reason. So I'm delighted that that's gone in. Just happy with everything, really delighted that everything's going forward. And as Mike just said about the toilets, I was going to ask, could we tap into that to fill the gap there? So that would be good, and at least we would get most of what we've asked for. So thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Alistair.
Thank you. Well, very happy with the report that's come before us. Happy to support the Cromarty Firth Ward projects. Content just to leave, I think it's 16,000. We won't try and take that away from you. Content to leave that with you, Maxine. Regarding the team projects, well, as we've been told, there's 2 projects that's come before us. One, the Picture House, and then the Tain Streetscape. I'll be supporting today the Tain Streetscape project because I believe that would give more benefit to the community at large. Our pavements in Tain are in an atrocious condition, and this has all come about because the lighting is in poor quality on Tain High Street as well, and the lighting department have fans available to come in and do the new lighting, new cables, etc. So doing the pavements after the map is a golden opportunity. So I'm very happy to support that project. Regarding the Picture House, I think we need to say the Picture House project, I think we need really from the Picture House people a more detailed breakdown of where the project is and how much more money is required for the project, because the 140,000 that's mentioned here is only a very small amount that's needed to complete this whole project, and my understanding is that the project could be in excess of £1 million. So, you know, the total project to take the Picture House back to what it was So I think we need from the team headed to trust a more feasible breakdown of what's actually required to complete this project in total. You know, 140,000 is not going to do anything really substantial in what's required in the overall pot for the picture house. But we haven't had that kind of information, and I think we need to seek that. So, you know, the Tain Street project will give great benefit not only to the high street, but to all users of the high street and to the businesses and the general public at large, and providing the new lighting scheme, tidying up wires that are on the buildings for the CCTV camera, for the Christmas lights, all that will be undergrounded. So it will have also create a good cosmetic look on the high street as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. I'll speak now as a Tain and Easter Ross member. First of all, I agree with the split. That's great, and we work so well with Cromtyfirth. I'd like to thank each of the members there for the way that they work with our ward. We always get on so well, and always agree, because we're always supporting one another. We're very close, tight wards. And their projects are great, particularly as CCTV. I understand. I know the difference that makes in Tain, and how often we refer back to that. So I'm delighted that you're going to get that as well. On our two projects, if I speak first about the streetscape, our pavements in Tain, I think I've seen Maxine nod her head as well, are absolutely atrocious. For years, Alistair and I have been trying to get the paving replaced, because it was never good in the first place. It was always slippy, and it's very, very fragile for public use. It's crumbling. And when we had that bad storm a few years ago, and we had more snow in Tain than anywhere else, when the snow ploughs came along and started digging up the snow, lots of parts of the pavement actually got dug up as well, and it's been left. We've got big gaps in the pavements, and the council keeps saying that they can't come along and fix it. So when we heard of this opportunity with lighting actually coming in and saying, well, we could do the pavements if you can find some money to put into it, and roads will put some money in, we thought this was the perfect opportunity to get our pavements done. So I think I would fully support this. This is the only way we can get this done. And I think if you ask members of the public who are forever complaining to us, people are falling on it all the time, they would say this would be the ideal use of the money. I'm just delighted that we'll get a really important project done in our ward if we do agree this money. I know the other project is important too, and it's important to the trust. So I appreciate there would be disappointment if the money went one way and not the other. But in terms of where the money is actually needed just now, I would say it's desperately needed for the streetscape. And that's why I would support that. So Maxine, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to come in after you'd spoken in your ward. So, you know, 2 of you out of 3 of you support the streetscape. And I think, you know, if I had to make a decision for you, I would agree. Not that I don't support the picture house, I do, as you know. And I think that you will absolutely consider that in the future, I've no doubt. Yeah, our own pavements, and we've got one of the longest high streets, if not the longest high street in Highland, and we do need to address that. But I was hoping more that would come from our roads budget, which, as you know, I'm trying to get more money put into. I'm not going to put a motion forward here about that, but I will discuss that in the budget meeting in council in due course, because for many years, as you know, the Easter Ross roads budget has been decimated year after year after year for the last 15 years that I've seen it, and we do need to get some more money, millions, maybe a couple, put back into the Easter Ross roads budget, and no doubt in all the roads budgets across Highland, but I can only fight for my own area. I can't fight for everybody else's. So hopefully we'll see more of that coming to full council and the budget committee, because we certainly need our potholes sorted properly, B, our resurfacing done right and properly, and we need our pavements done, because we've had to prioritise, and we can't say fix the pavements when we need the cars to drive over a smooth road. So we've had to leave the pavements, and as we know, there's been accidents, people tripping, falling, and so fully support you putting money to that, but hopefully your roads budget as well in the future will take account of that too. So just for Mark Rogers and Ian Moncrief and everybody that's here from roads, you you know, don't think we're not behind you, and we know you need more staff, and we know you need more plant, and we know you need more money. So we are trying to do what we can behind the scenes. But of course, you know, we're only 7 members out of 74, but we will keep fighting the fight and do our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Just to say, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members here and fully support all that you've said about needing additional funds into our area. Certainly, I would support any steps you take to try and make that happen. I'm sure most, if not all, I don't know, of the other members would feel the same way, so that the committee would be fully behind any action that we had to take to try and make that happen. So, and thank you for your support. I thought you would all understand about our pavements. If you've walked down the High Street in Tyne, you would know the desperate need for this project. So thank you for that. Alan, do you need anything else before I read through the recommendations? Oh, you're on mute.
The only thing I would say, Chair, is that this is a 5-year programme. Now, I understand the conflicts that you have when you're oversubscribed. It's the same for a lot of areas that have operated the Challenge Fund. But the good thing is that it's a 5-year programme, and we do have other funding sources available to us, like the Highland Coastal Community Fund, and we will be looking later in the year to closer alignment of those funds as well, and just the process for applicants and how they apply to the council as well. So I've got no doubt there'll be other funding opportunities in terms of the Picture House, the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, the Scottish Government's National Challenge Fund, which we were unsuccessful with the Picture House in round 9. Round 10 will open imminently. I would imagine we'll be looking at that again as well. So I'm sure there'll be other capital funding opportunities in the short term.
That's great. Thank you, Alan. That's very positive. Note tender. I'll just run through the recommendations just for clarity. So the committee's been asked to agree to invest £2,887.64 in the Shore Road project in Invergordon. Agree to investing £30,000 in CCTV in Alness. Agree to investing £35,000 in CCTV in Invergordon. Agree to investing £40,000 in new public convenience provision in Evington. Agree to investing £14,948 in the Tyndallen play area in Evington. And agree to holding £17,319.36 as contingency for Ward 6 projects. And the next recommendation was to look at the 2 projects. And we've agreed that we will move ahead with the Thames Streetscape. We all seem to have problems saying that. Streetscape Pavements project. Okay, and then we will grant delegated authority to the Executive Chief Officer of Infrastructure, Environment and Economy in consultation with the Area Committee Chair to allocate any uncommitted PBIP grant to approved PBIP beneficiaries in the event the additional investment is required. And finally, to agree that the Council write to the Scottish Government to request permission to carry over the value of any uncommitted PBIP grant into 2022-23. Have we agreed, all those members? Yep, okay, great. That's you, Alan, thank you.
Thank you very much, members, much appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, now we'll move on to, which is number 7 on the agenda, but it's the Area Roads Capital Programme, and it's on pages 54 to 59 of your papers. And we have Colin Howell and Ian Moncrief both here to talk to the report. I don't know who's going to talk first.
Thank you, Chair.
Ian.
Yeah. So members will remember that we discussed these projects at the recent Ward Business meeting, and we have a budget of £270,000 for the Easter Ross area. And just running through these projects, we have B817 Dalmore Roundabout, B817 Westward Roundabout, and both roundabouts are in fairly poor condition, principally because of the HCV traffic, and the actual surfacing layers are now worn out. We have the Badonaker Junction, which is also known as Newmore. We're looking at a small overlay there. Again, the junction's worn out. Balnabrook Road, which members will remember that it's in fairly poor condition, and there's been several residents asking for assistance on that road. Entrance to Mayfield, Duthick Wind, and then we have School Road in Milton. The whole of the Milton estate is in badly need of some work, and you'll see that further down the list we have other streets in Milton. And finally, Stafford Street, Jeannie Street, where we're looking at the junction. You members will also see that there's a red line there. Above the red line, the projects can be funded from the anticipated capital budget. Below the red line, these are schemes that I would like to undertake should additional funding be available. And here we have the Saltburn Distributor Road, the Dingwall to Evandon Back Road, which is just under 7.8 kilometres of overlay, and Milton Village Loop Road, Drovers Way, again in Milton, and the Merit to Arabella Road, which is about just over 3 kilometres of surface dressing. Where we're looking at surface dressing, that will also include patching, either using a paver with regulating tar to take out any small potholes, minor potholes, etc. Or when there's more substantial patching required, then it will be excavated and reinstated prior to the surface dressing. So that's our programme, councillors, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Got a bit of echo there. All the mutes, yeah, okay. So if I can go first, and then I'll go for people that have got their hands up. Can I ask about the roads that weren't done, that were agreed previously? So my example would be Farm Junction, which is crumbling. As you know, it's in a terrible, terrible state. So what's going to happen about that and everything else? You'll recall, I think it was 2 committee meetings ago, we got a list, an updated list of everything, you know, that had been taking place. And the Crompty Firth ward, I think the vast majority had ticked off. And then you moved to Tain and Easter Ross, and there was line after line after line saying, can't be done, can't be done, can't be done. Then you did go on to explain why the contractors couldn't come in, or it was more expensive than thought. You know, there was different reasons, but we didn't get a whole list of things done that was meant to be done, and they just disappeared. I want to be assurance that they won't disappear, that we're still getting those done, as well as what's on the list just now. And just to pick up on Maxine's point, the roads now have never ever been as bad as they are. They are absolutely shocking. I am so embarrassed when I drive around Tain and Easter Ross, and Crompty Firth is the same. I drive around there regularly too, and it's awful. You cannot travel very far without going through a pothole. Some really massive potholes like this, and really deep. We're not talking little uneven patches of road. We're talking huge craters that we report, and they can't get dealt with for whatever reason. The road squad just can't come and deal with them. It's shocking. We get complaints every single day. Our name is Mud on Facebook. People complain constantly, and I totally understand why they do. And they seem to think that we're not responding to dealing with it, which of course we are. We're fighting tooth and nail for our area. There just aren't the resources available to put in, and we do understand that. And I would like to highlight how good Gary Urquhart is. He's fabulous, and that has to be noted. He always responds. He's very great with councillors. He's also really good with the public. He will come along and he will meet with people and talk to them. He's got a great attitude, and he's a really great asset to Highland Council, and he represents Highland Council really, really well. And he tries so hard to respond to our needs, but he doesn't have the manpower mostly, but also, you know, the additional financial resources to respond to our needs, and it's so frustrating for Gary. And of course, he's getting phone calls and texts from us constantly throughout the day, and he tries very hard to respond, but he's so limited in what he can do. And I'm probably speaking on behalf of every member here when we say that we realise it's not Gary's fault, absolutely not Gary's fault, that he can't deal with what we're asking him to deal with. But we do need to, as a Highland Council, address this. We need to find the money to put into our roads, because we cannot continue. Otherwise, there's people are not going to be able to use the roads to get to work. They're not going to be able to get out of their houses. That's not being overly dramatic to say how bad the situation is just now in Tain and Easter Ross. So I'll move on and let the other members speak. I have Derek first.
Yes, thanks, Fiona, and thanks to the officers for getting me back in, and thanks, Ian, for the report. So there's a few. I mean, there's a few things. Obviously, it's great to see the 50 square meters of patching at the entrance to Mayfield Duthock Wynd. We managed to get that back onto the programme. A huge victory for the people living in that housing scheme. We thought that was going to be done during the year, but there we go. 50 square meters will get done next year, so that's excellent. I wondered how Easter Ross compared with Wester Ross, and fortunately into my inbox dropped a press release. And in the press release, I'm going to read it out because I think it's quite important. Approximately 2,930 metres of surface dressing on the A890 Ochtertyre, the dam. 3,332 metres of surface dressing on the A835 Drumrunny. Around 5,000 metres, 5 kilometres of surface dressing the A896 Torridon to Kinloch U Road, and 2 kilometres, 2,000 metres of surface dressing on the A890 Strome Ferry Viewpoint East. So that totaled 13 kilometres, 13,262 metres. I wasn't sure were these roads 4 metres wide or 6 metres wide. But that's either 53,000 square metres or just under 80,000 square metres being done in Wester Ross. And then I added up wards 6 and 7, and that came to 10,000 square metres. So either 5 times or 8 times the amount of work that's been done in Easter Ross has been done in Wester Ross. So congratulations to the Wester Ross councillors, because clearly they're much more persuasive and they're doing a much better job than all of us are doing in Easter Ross, or we're being made fools of. I don't know which it is. I'm not going to criticise the list that you've produced, Ian. I understand fully. You have a limited budget. You'll have done the absolute best you can with it. I don't know if the money being spent in Wester Ross is some sort of strategic reserve that's being kept for, so it isn't the allocation to the ward. But for 5 to 8 times as much money to be spent in Wester Ross has been spent in Easter Ross, I think brings the whole system into disrepute. We're just in despair with it. You know, we're arguing over 50 square meters, and they're looking at 50,000. Yeah, I can't explain what's going on.
Thank you, Derek. It's a very good point. I think we'll go round each of the members and get all your points first before we then move on to Ian and Colin for them to address them. So next, Maxine.
Sorry, I was looking at an email when you said that. You took me off guard. Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree with what everything Derek said. There's probably a reason Wester Ross is getting that. I don't know the reason, but maybe Ian or Mark will be able to tell us, because it is a curiosity that our constituents will ask us about. And, you know, our constituents will say, well, whose fault is it? that you haven't got enough money in the roads budget. Like last night, whose fault is it that the Tyne bypass came to a halt? You know, it's not our officers' fault. It's not the management's fault. And it's certainly not our drivers' fault. And they do get it, and they get it a lot. And it is a shame. And, you know, it's a case of trying to educate the public. And I try my best from social media to educate them. But ultimately, in the press release that I put out a few weeks ago, it is councillors' fault. It is our fault. Although, in our defence, we have always tried to fight for our own corner and fight for more money. But over the years and all the budget cuts that come from central government, and again, that is not council's fault, we get cut and cut and cut. And so roads have suffered because a huge proportion, I think it's something like 374 million out of the 500 to 600 million that we get every year in revenue to spend goes to education. So people have to start realising this. And, you know, if they don't want their roads to be falling apart and their pavements, then people in general, the public, are going to have to accept that the other areas that have been given it in the past, education, social work, then we're going to have to take some back. And, you know, what I'd like to ask, and I touched upon it in the previous item, is that we add as a recommendation as an area committee that we do write officially to the leader of the council and to the budget leader, Councillor Alistair Christie. I believe he's taken that job on now, to say that Easter Ross demands that we get millions put back into the roads budget, because we can't, in all conscience, do our job properly as councillors, because we're just making excuse after excuse to our constituents because we can't do the job. And then we shout at you guys, and you know, and then the public shout at our drivers, and it's not fair. So if we could add a recommendation, if it's supported by everybody, that we do write in the strongest terms, quite happy to help you write that letter to the leader, to the budget leaders, to say we need money put in back into our roads budget, and we are demanding it. And you know, we've got to find a way to do that. Thank you.
Okay, Maxine, thank you. Absolutely support your suggestion. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. I think if you listen to Biz Campbell and her presentations, there's not a lot of money been spent in her bit, but you know, it's you got to pick and choose, and certainly there's quite a bit of money spent elsewhere as well. And it's a very, very difficult situation. I know that the officers have in trying to distribute to the monies that are involved. And Maxine's right. Over the years, the money has been taken from roads. Well, remember that in the last good number of years. And I think the phrase was education, education, education quite a few years back. And I think that started the ball rolling into putting a lot of money in there. I've got nothing whatever against money being spent in education, but it's got to be fairly distributed as well. And I think Colin might be able to add a wee bit of information here with regard to the budget that's coming up. I don't know if it's still top secret or not, but it's something that has to be looked at within this year's budget, I'm quite sure. Now, with regard to works that have been done, certainly appreciate some of the works that have been done in the Eventon area, albeit it was desperately needed. Glenglass and some of the potholes going up into the back road to Dingwall, and of course the road down to the cemetery, which is we much appreciate that being done, because it's used obviously by the community both locally and externally, and it's a good presentation there, so I want to thank Ian for getting that done. But with regard to our previous meeting that we had, and I think Ian will remember that we talked about the verges on the back road to Dingwall, and that was going to be fitted into this year's budget. And I'm hoping that that's still there. It doesn't seem to be, if you're talking about it being under the red line, but it may well be. One of the major problems there again, I think, is the increase in very large vehicles using that road and lack of passing places. Because when folk meet, they drive up onto the verge and destroy the verge, and of course the tire gets broken up as well. But a good number of the potholes have been filled in there, but how long they'll last, nobody knows. But certainly it's a difficult job for you. and glad to see the roundabout's been done. They are really, really in a bad way at Dalmore and Westford. So good to have that. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Alistair.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the report, Ian. It's good to see Colin Howell with us as well today. You know, it's very interesting what Derek has said to us there. And, you know, we don't take anything that other areas are getting more than us, but what we do want is equality and fairness. And, you know, I've often said in this meeting and in many other meetings that if more tar is ever laid in the Sutherland County area, for example, the place will start to sink. And, you know, these are roads I travel on quite a bit, and it's quite amazing to see the stretches of road that get renewed up there compared to the very small areas that get down here. And I think what Derek's emphasised just today, he just backs that up. You know, the programme's there before us. There's nothing we can do about it, really. It's not really as much as we would like. It's a very little programme, and whether it will be achieved, you know, we can't say to people now that's going to happen, because we said to the people in Mayfield Wind that was going to happen months ago, and it never happened. So we can't really give people that kind of indication now. But what I would like to ask is about the Farm Junction. This work started there on Monday, and was going fairly well, I think, but now it's stopped. And I understand there's a major water problem there, and I'd be interested to know, I understand that you were all meeting on site there yesterday. Has that been resolved? How are you going to resolve it? And, you know, there's certainly the base tar that's been put on is good at this moment in time, but obviously that won't last. So if you could give members a report on what's the situation with the Farm Junction. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. I'll have Pauline, and then I've been asked if I could have a break. So I think we'll have a 5-minute comfort break. We'll have Pauline first, and then we'll do
thanks, Fiona. I'll keep it as brief as I can. Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything Maxine said, Fiona, everyone has said. We're all struggling. The biggest thing that I get back, as well as getting the blame for all the potholes, which, you know, we deal with and we've got no option to deal with, is that the communication. A lot of people phone me all the time and say, but you reported that last month, why is it not done? Why is the council not telling us when it's been done? And I find that really difficult. I was thinking, you know, once we get more money, I know that there's not enough staff and everything just now, but if we manage to get some more money in the pot, would it not be quite good to hire somebody in an IT sort of section to keep the people that are reporting them up to date? Because that's the biggest issue for me. They're shouting about at me saying that, oh, but the council said they would try their best and it's not done. And they get quite, you know, shirty with us. So for me, I would love to get a database to say, look, we're trying our best. Somebody let them know that they're trying their best. We're trying to get around everything. This is when we estimate we could get round. Even giving people an estimation is better than giving them nothing, if that makes sense. So I would like to see that happen. Again, Fiona, I'd like to say thank you very much as well to Gary. I think, poor man, God love him. He's so good to us all. He does a pound of work for everyone, runs around all over the place and deserves all the credit he's getting. So yeah, glad to see our roundabouts have been done, but yeah, would love to see a bit more. Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more about communication. People report potholes all the time and they hear nothing back, and the pothole doesn't get repaired, and they think the council are just ignoring them. That is a constant phrase that I get. The council don't care, the council haven't replied, the council just ignore us. So I think communication is a big issue that we do have to address. So I'll go to Ian and Colin after we have a 5-minute break. So if we come back at 25 past. Okay, welcome back everyone. If I can just hand over now to Ian and Colin to address all the points that were raised.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just come in and talk about the general issues and then defer to Ian over the detail. And members have raised some incredibly important issues today in terms of our roads and the issues before us. And I also want to say that I'm attending all the area committees, and thank you for taking this early so I can go off to the Inverness area. And the reassurance I'm receiving is the genuine support from members to the work that the roads officers do. And that is genuinely appreciated by staff, and I do hope that that Ian will pass on your thanks to Gary, who we all appreciate the work that Gary's doing. Just to give you a little bit of background to some of the strategic issues, we've identified an engineering and roads review as part of the redesign process, and we have done a full review of the issues and identified 42 major items that we need to address. And I'll come back to that. And we've got a working group with members, and the members that are on that working group is Margaret Davison, Councillor Margaret Davison, and Councillor Raymond Bremner. We also have staff side representation as well as a group of officers. We've held 2 workshops with members, and we're taking a paper to the redesign board tomorrow. And what you will see if you look at the papers for the redesign is an identification of the scope of the work that we're doing, and also an emerging action plan. So identifying what the issues are and looking to develop an action plan to implement the improvements that we're looking at. And members have talked today about the allocation, and I remain to be convinced that the allocation that we currently have across the Highlands is working best for maintaining our asset. We know an awful lot about the road asset condition, and as part of the redesign process, one piece of work will look at very specifically the allocation of budgets across the Highlands and work out how we best use those budgets to the benefit of the road network as a whole. And also we identify communication. Clearly there are issues over communication, identification of defects, rectification of defects, and how we engage with our communities over identifying what those issues are and what response. Because I do understand that a lot of people are very frustrated that they raise issues and they don't feel that we take any cognizance of the issues. That's not actually the case. But we do need to communicate that much better. And again, if you look at the work of the redesign paper, there's an awful lot of actions there, but communication is definitely included within that. So hopefully you'll see that through this process, we've got an opportunity to review the way we do things and ensure that we spend the money that is allocated to us, both in capital and revenue, as wisely as we can. I want to stress the importance of programming. Ian's brought a paper before you, and it's really important that we agree that work program, because we need to schedule and program those works, and we need to schedule and program those works as effectively as possible. And that'll be a mixed economy between in-house delivery and external contractors, and we need to get on with that task. In terms of there's been issues about the funding levels. You will see in the paper that Ian's brought a red line, and what you see below that red line is the opportunities that we will bring forward should additional funds become available. So in each area paper, we've identified a program. We've also identified additional schemes that if additional revenue or additional capital come forward, we can move straight away and take the benefit from that. So hopefully that will give you some reassurance, members, that many of the issues that you've raised today are certainly being considered. But I do want to defer to Ian over the actual detail. So Ian, if you could specifically, I mean, I heard a couple of comments about Farm Junction and also about carry forward from schemes not finished from last year.
Thank you. First of all, yes, I would agree that without Gary's effort and also the effort of his squads, we would be in a far worse position than we are just now. And I'll certainly pass your thanks on to Gary and his foreman, and then down to the operatives. That means a lot to our men, because you'll see that as you've experienced social media, especially, there's an awful lot of negative comments floating about. Those comments are also going to the men, and I've heard, and maybe not in the East of Ross area, but certainly across Ross and Cromarty, that's affecting their partners and also their children at school. It's a very negative issue, social media. So I'll certainly pass on those thanks, because I know it will be much appreciated. Each year when I come to the committee, I bring a finely balanced draft programme. That programme is based on road mileage in each area, and the budget is set against the Ross and Cromarty budget. Each year that is very finely balanced, and members will remember that last year the programme was passed subject to additional requests by members being undertaken. Those additional requests generated an awful lot of extra spend. That was only made possible because I was allowed to use accelerated expenditure. This might not be the opportunity to go through line by line each of the schemes that we have completed, but I'll be more than happy to provide a summary by email to the councillors. That extra spend comes at a price. The price is that this year the budget for Easter Ross area is significantly reduced because I can't keep, if you pardon the phrase, kicking the can down the road. Looking at specific issues, Farm Junction, yes, we did hit a problem. We came across a spring that's coming up through the tar layers and is actually coming out onto the road surface. Clearly, if we put down the wading course, then what would happen is that the wading course would just disintegrate and we'd be back to where we started. The solution is to put in a French drain or a filter drain to intercept that groundwater and lead it into the drainage that's already been improved. Once that's done, we'll put a final coat on it. Looking at some of the other issues, the verges on and the strengthening and the passing places on the Dingwall to Edmonton Back Road, that wasn't included in this programme. Councillor Finlayson, you might remember that at the ward business meeting I explained that we did have a separate budget and funds would be allocated to the passing places, edge strengthening and verges. So that's not on this capital programme. It's a separate budget, but that work will be undertaken. Compared to other areas, Easter Ross area gets its fair share of the capital based on the road mileage, as I've said. But this year, because there was an overspend last year, it's less. And I hope councillors will understand that I can't just create a budget. I have to work to the resources that I've got available. Councillor Munro, yes, I fully accept that communications could be improved, and we'll see what we can do on that front. There are additional works that were requested last year that haven't been undertaken. And Councillor Robertson, I believe you mentioned the patching Farm to Port Mahomet to Ballantor, Balmucky to Ballantor, Tain to Mains of Arble, and St Catherine's. As I explained previously, I went out to a contractor and I got a quote of £410,000 last year, which was excessive. I then went out to a second contractor, and if I remember correctly, I got a quote of about 800,000. Last year, we saw that many of the contractors had a full order book, so they could more or less write whatever price they wanted. Since then, we have taken on the Pothole Pro, which is basically it's a wheeled excavator with some specialised kit on the front. It rips out the road, and it means that we can undertake permanent patching much faster. That's presently working over in Wester Ross area, and the initial reports are very favourable with that. Gary is already compiling a list of potholes that he's going to put the Pothole Pro towards. I think that might be all the specific questions. I'm happy to take any more though.
Okay, thank you. And if I can just come back on the point you raised there. There was the list of roads that was to get done in Tain and Easter Ross, and as you quite rightly say, we've got feedback here. As you quite rightly say, that did go out and you reported it to the committee that went out to contract, and it was way more expensive. So then you did bring in the patcher to work in our area, but they didn't do everything that needed to be done. Ran out of time or get moved to Wester Ross or for whatever reason. So what happens to the budget that we were allocated for those roads to get done? So, you know, we had a certain amount of money. Obviously, it wasn't enough money in Tain and Easter Ross compared to what we needed for the contractors. However, we still had that allocation and we haven't used it up. What's happened to that? We should be getting that and our new allocation together, surely.
I understand your point, Councillor Robertson. But as I said, when I bring my draft programme to the committee, it's finely costed, finely balanced. With all the extra jobs, there wasn't so much of a planned programme. And the jobs that we did receive, the extra jobs that we were asked to do, didn't come in one go. They came in maybe not in drips and drabs, but they certainly came in over a prolonged period. That meant that balancing the costs wasn't easy and it wasn't simple. So we've actually spent last year far more in Easter Ross area than the planned budget for. Now, as I said earlier, I mean, I'm happy to go through each particular scheme line by line, but perhaps this isn't the most, perhaps it might be better if I can put that in an email and councillors can scrutinise that at their leisure and then come back to me. But we overspent the budget in Easter Ross area, and I would really like to get back to having a planned programme approved at committee so that we know how much we're spending. That's why this year the budget is significantly less than it would normally be.
Colin, you're on mute.
Schoolboy error, apologies. Chair, can I just chip in and say, just to give you the reassurance that money allocated to an area stays within that area. So consequently, if there is a commensurate underspend in the delivery of a capital programme, they will be carried forward. So that money will be carried forward into the next year. And in certain areas, that's exactly what's happening. You know, the delivery of the programme has not achieved the full programme, which has meant that money's been carried forward. What the other side of the coin is if you accelerate spend and you deliver more in 1 year, then that is taken off the future year's budget. But the reality of it is that we actually don't find out what the end of year final outturn is until about June. That's when we get all the rationalisation. So Ian's budget for next financial year, we will only really know by about June, but just you need to be reassured that the money stays within the area. If there's an underspend from last year, it will be carried forward. If there's an overspend, not an overspend, we call it an acceleration. If the program's accelerated, then we need to adjust that in the future year. If there's slippage in the program, which means that we haven't delivered, it's carried forward. So it's just to give you that reassurance, and that's what Ian's trying to wrestle with. He's trying to anticipate what his outturn will be. That will identify how much money he's got to spend in the next financial year, but it does stay within your area.
Okay, thank you, Colin. That is reassuring. So therefore, it would be helpful when Ian corresponds with us, if he gives us a list of the roads, so we obtain an Easter Ross programme that we arranged and agreed last year that hasn't been done. If we could also have the figures against that, so we know how much money was being allocated to Tain and Easter Ross, how much was spent, what it was spent on, how much we're carrying forward, and how that's going to be spent to carry forward. If we can get all that information as well, that would then reassure us.
Certainly, Councillor Robertson, that's not a problem. However, okay. I would say that the figures I have just now are not the final figures. We've still got costs coming in, but it's certainly giving you a good indication that we have significantly spent over the budget for Easter Ross area. And the breakdown will show you which schemes we spent what on.
Okay, that'd be good. Thank you. Maxine, you would like to speak?
Yeah, thank you for letting us back in sometimes in this committee. Can I first apologise to Mark because I forgot he was property and housing and kept putting him into this job, and forgot Colin had the promotion. Sorry. Right, I just want to talk about what Colin said about the programme about the Redesign board, which I used to be on, but I don't go to the moment because I'm not on it anymore. Now, okay, I love the work of the Redesign board and the way they make more things a lot more efficient, and I love their enthusiasm and everything else, but often there isn't more money put into the thing that needs changed. And so I noticed that Colin didn't mention whether there was going to be or not. So unless, you know, with all the will in the world of spending it wisely, which Ian is already doing and has been doing since he's been in post, I'm not sure that there would be a significant improvement on the recommendations from the Redesign board. Obviously, I haven't seen them yet, but unless there was more money injected, I can't see it's going to make the difference. And the reason I say that is because when I was first a councillor in 2000 and whenever it was, I think it was 2007, we had 3 times as many staff in the Easter Ross Roads department as we do now. So, you know, I can't see that any like new recommendation that's been put forward is going to help significantly unless we're able to get more staff. And it is about more staff, because if we suddenly get more money for our capital budget, we might end up having to give it to a contractor. And although we have some really good contractors in our area who are not unscrupulous, if they're full, they won't tender. And obviously, as we know, with COVID, things were put on hold, so they suddenly got busy and we were getting the ridiculous prices because they didn't really want the job. So we kind of end up in a stalemate, same situation. But I mean, the money that I'm referring to is not capital. The money that I'm referring to is a revenue budget, which I know is difficult for the public to get their head around. But unless we get more money injected into our revenue budget in Easter Ross, that is the issue. So maybe if we do agree at the end that we're going to write, maybe we can somehow write today, given that the Redesign board is meeting tomorrow to consider recommendations, and then that letter can maybe be shared with them, and you know, we can at least highlight that to them. I'm not expecting them to suddenly agree we get more money, because that's not in their gift, but at least we're putting the marker down every single place we go so that they know where we're coming from. Regarding communication, I don't want Ian to spend a lot of his time communicating to us if it's taken away from his other job, because the other job of hands-on is really important. But what I could maybe suggest is, years ago we used to use what's called the CRM system, and I noticed that this term of the last 5 years, councillors weren't really encouraged to do it. And I don't do it either, because it's quicker to go to Gary or to Ian than it is to write something in the CRM. But maybe there's a way that the people that manage the CRM system and the IT could somehow send us a link monthly or whatever, and that might work. And that would save on Ian's time. But it's just a thought, and I'll leave that for Colin to explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine. Mike.
Yes, thank you, Fiona, for taking me in again. I'd like to apologise to Ian. I'd forgotten about that extra budget you talked about, and I'm very grateful it's still there, so that's good. Ian, in your presentation, you actually mentioned the purchase of a machine which is going to be good for doing the potholes. But my understanding is that part of the reason for roads breaking up is the poor drainage, gullies and all that sort of stuff. And I'm wondering if under capital, do we have any intention of increasing our fleet with regard to gully emptying facilities? But I do know that you can have all the vehicles you like, but if you don't have staff, you're just not going to be able to do it. So it's a double-edged sword, really. But it's so important, especially now that other developments are going on, and heavy rain, and soil being washed into drains and all that, that we have a complete look at the what's been happening in the drainage systems. So I'm just wondering, is it possible to? I think we only have one gully empty. I don't know what area it covers, but I know it's a massive area, and we could do with some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. You were the last person to speak. So Colin or Ian, do you want to?
Yeah, If I can just come back, Councillor Finlayson, just to reassure you that we are looking at not just putting new tar onto roads, but also looking at drainage improvements for each of these schemes. So it's not just drainage improvements, we're also looking at verge improvements, whether we need to repair any parapets or any other ironwork or road infrastructure. Because what we don't want to do is surface a road and then find that we then have to come back and dig it up to fix something else. So yes, I can guarantee that we are looking at the drainage for each of these schemes on the programme.
Chair, I'll just come in very briefly and talk about the redesign. And the redesign board has worked hard to try and get over the interrelationship between revenue spend and capital spend. Revenue spend is the cyclical maintenance, the process by which we get as much life out of our asset as possible. That drainage, you know, when I was at university, drainage to keep roads in good condition. We need to get back to a revenue spend that we can do consistent cyclical maintenance. So the redesign board does identify the opportunities that exist if additional funding was identified and how we may spend that effectively. So whilst the process clearly can't identify additional monies, that process does identify that additional monies were coming in, how they would most effectively be spent. And I think members do appreciate that relationship between revenue and capital. We do need revenue to keep the cyclical maintenance going. Capital is dealing with those sections of road that need more structural intervention. But if we can maintain the existing roads we've got better, that is clearly the wise thing to do. So hopefully that helps that.
Thank you, Colin. That's very helpful to know. So the committee has now been asked to approve the proposed Area Roads Capital Programme for Easter Ross. Are we all approving that with the additional recommendation that we will write to the Leader of the Council and the Budget Leader, and we can talk about that after the committee, and we'll get that done today. Okay, is everyone happy with that?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Thank you, Ian. We appreciate you coming along. Okay, we'll move to item number what was 4, the Highland Coastal Communities Fund Assessment of Applications. And it's on pages 32 to 48 of your report. And we have Fiona Cameron here, who's been waiting really patiently. Thank you, Fiona. Sorry we had to jiggle things about a bit, but thank you for waiting. If you would like to talk to the report.
Thanks, Chair, and yeah, good morning, members. So I'll keep this fairly brief. I'm sure members remember that last year, from the initial allocation for the Coastal Communities Fund, there was a desire to ring fence an amount for the Saltburn area to come forward with an application. So the remaining balance in the fund at that time was £15,996. And today we have for your consideration an application from Saltburn and Westwood Community Council, which would be to undertake Saltburn Beach Access Improvements Project. It's quite a straightforward project. It has 3 main strands to it, one which would be the repair of the slipway, one which is installation of new steps, and finally the installation of handrails. The costs that are provided in the application are all based on quotes, so we think that they are as accurate as they could be at this stage. And in total, the group would be looking for £13,630 and 31 pence to deliver this work. You'll see from the RAG assessment that we've provided for you today that we've got no significant concerns with the project and there's no eligibility issues. And should members wish to approve it today, the 2 conditions we would like to attach are that the group provide a maintenance plan to show how they will undertake maintenance on an ongoing basis. And secondly, members may be aware there's been a long-standing issue around establishing the ownership of the slipway. But I have had some preliminary conversations with our internal auditors about this, and they're comfortable that given the level of grant funding we're looking at here, there would be a pragmatic way to address this. So that doesn't need to prevent you making an approval today if you wish to. So that's quite a quick overview of the project, but I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you, Fiona. We don't have any questions, so are members happy to approve the amount requested with the additional 2 technical conditions attached to it that Fiona suggested? Okay, we seem to be happy with that, Fiona, so we'll move ahead with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to item, what was 7 on the report, 6 on the report, Highland Council place-based funds, and pages 49 to 53. The committee is invited to consider and approve the proposed applications and funding allocations, and Helen Ross is here. Helen.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail because I think everything that's in the report has been discussed with the local ward members in some detail. But just to pick it out in terms of overall for the Cromarty Firth, we are reallocating the 12k that we intended to use for a play officer towards the cost of play equipment. So that's a reallocation. And also I see in section 4.7 of the Cromarty Firth section, when I'm referring to the proposed £3,000 for the locking facility for the all-nest toilets, a sentence is simply unfinished about how it meets the criteria. So my apologies for that. Absolutely, it does meet the criteria in terms of supporting the town centre and the economy. So it definitely does fit within the aims and objectives of the fund. I don't know quite what happened to me there. But members went round the ward, and I see Ingrid Jameson is there from Amenity Service. We've looked at each of the play areas together, so members have a high awareness of that. And the other items have all been discussed with members at ward business meetings. Happy to answer any questions, of course. And then looking at the Tain and Easter Ross wards again, obviously we went round with Amenity Service, and I think we all found that very, very useful to look at the play areas, and the proposals come directly from those visits and conversations. But for the remaining funding, what the report proposes is that we set up a small grant stream for applications of up to 10,000 for applications that would address the harms of COVID. The only other thing I'd like to mention that could perhaps use a portion of that funding if members were so minded is the Tain and Easter Ross members were speaking recently about the fact that there's only one smiley left in the ward, and that it can't be everywhere at once, and it's very popular. Gary Urquhart has provided an approximate cost for a new smiley, which would be battery operated and solar powered, so therefore could be moved around the ward, and that would be approximately 1,700 each. So we only have one left now. At one point there was 3, some of them used across the 2 wards. So if members were looking for one, it would be 1,700 or approximately 3-4 if 2 were required. So members might want to consider that in either or across both wards. Other than that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Maxine.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I don't have questions. It's mostly observations. So just taking your last point first about the smileys, just can members bear in mind when we order those smileys that are supposed to be solar powered and recharge themselves, they don't always work, and often then they have to be taken down and charged somewhere else. So we've got one in our own Cromarty Firth ward that does that, and I constantly get constituents going, smiley's not working, and then it takes several weeks till it works again, and blah blah blah. So just bear that in mind if it's the ones that I'm thinking of. So I don't really think I want to propose that we want any more in the Cromarty Firth ward at this moment in time, but I wouldn't mind us having it on the agenda for a future ward business meeting, and going around and seeing where we might need one more permanently. Regarding the play parks, happy to support that, of course, and can I thank Ingrid and John and Bill for coming round and looking at the play parks. But I do have a question for Ingrid, and that is kind of where are we with the plans, because you were going to draw up some designs for us, because remember originally we wanted a kind of play park ranger who would do that, but we couldn't get anybody applying for the job that had the credentials. So wonder where we are with that, because I don't really want it to drag on, because we've had 18 months of it dragging on, and so we need the designs, we need it as a priority, and we need to get these play parks up and running. We've identified money that we want to put into it, so can we crack on with it? So maybe Ingrid could let me know where we are with it.
Okay, thank you, Maxine. I'll just add in there about the smileys. You're absolutely right. We have the same issue. It has to be taken down and taken away to be charged, and that seems to take a huge amount of time. So what I'd ask Gary, is there an alternative? Are there ones that go into the mains, that will just work off of that? but obviously he hasn't perhaps maybe got prices for that. So I would recommend that we go back to Gary and we ask him, you know, for alternatives. So for instance, the one at Ross Keene, I'm not quite sure how that one works, but it's always there. It never gets taken away. It's very effective as well. So I'm not sure how that gets charged, what sort of power.
Yeah.
So if we could look at that, sorry, Maxine, I'll come in a minute. If we could look at that and see how that's powered, but it's not necessarily Smiley's as well. So it's different ones. So the Ross Keene one is slow down. And that might be what we want to look at. We were wanting different options of ones that are available so that we could see, because different areas have different problems. Ballantor have a very specific problem that they would like one of these in for, and perhaps a Smiley's not appropriate, but different faces. So I think we have to look at it in more detail. But I would absolutely recommend that we use some of this funding towards purchasing at least two. I would certainly say we need to supplement the one that we've got that's not terribly effective because it keeps running out of battery. But we need to look at what different options, maybe better options, are out there first before we go ahead and buy anything. Helen's got her hand up to come back, and Ingrid. Maxine, is there just another point you wanted to add?
It was just to tell you about the one at Ross Keene that is run by Bear Scotland, and the initial one that put in kept breaking down because it was solar powered. So I think they found a way to power this new one, and it does work all the time. But I would suspect it cost about 30 grand. But just speak to Bear Scotland about that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you. Okay, Helen, Ingrid.
Taking the last point first, Gary has sent details on the website, and we can obviously, I can share that with members. And I think it's a similar cost for a Smiley. It does go into the mains, but then of course the Smiley is static, so you can't move it around the ward. So, and I think there's sometimes people wonder if they remain effective, but that's something clearly that could be considered, whether members want to consider it and come back to use some of the funding or allocate some potentially for that. Obviously, that's for members to consider. And then going back to the point about the play parks, my understanding, and Ingrid obviously can come in if she has a different understanding, was that as we went round and we agreed specifically the pieces of kit to go into each play area, that effectively meant that we didn't, we weren't doing designing play areas from scratch, because we went round and we did talk about specific pieces of kit to replace items or items to be moved. So I didn't think there was an additional process of design now envisaged, but Ingrid may have a different or better understanding of that.
Yes, good morning, members. When we went round with the parks meetings, there was that idea that we would be putting forward proposals for pieces of equipment. What happens is that when it comes to actually putting these pieces of equipment down, there may be ideas where we would like them to be, but in reality, when we start having a dig and a test hole and that, we can't really get these items in. There's, for example, in Tiendalen, the area that we thought we were going to put some tunnels in, we've had a closer look at it and we're going to have to move them away to a slightly different area. So a lot of the designs that we would have put forward on paper wouldn't necessarily work in reality. So it's more of a put down in the reports what we would ideally like and what we were going to be moving and upgrading in other areas.
Thank you, Ingrid. Maxine, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, sorry, hogging it, but it's important. No, what I meant kind of what I thought Ingrid was doing was like you've just said about the tunnels. And so in Tyndall, we wanted to put some tunnels in and maybe change the banking and that sort of thing. Then in the one at Farish Crescent, we were talking about putting something into the ground and whatever, and maybe tyres and stuff like that. And we would try and provide the tyres for you from the quarry. Pat's offered some. And also then the likes of the Milner Fir, although it was pieces of kit, we did talk about landscaping as well and whether or not we needed a fence and things like that. So I don't want you to waste time drawing stuff for me. If it's in your head and you know and you can tell the officers what to do, perfectly happy with that. But I kind of want an update and timescale of when we can expect each one to be at a certain stage, if that makes sense. Thank you.
And I'll just take in Pauline before we go back to Ingrid.
Yeah, firstly, I would like to also, same as Maxine, thank Ingrid and her team for coming out. It was really actually very good because we got more of a say in what we thought would would help each community, which was really good. But I would like to thank it as well, because in Milnafua, actually, we now have a few things that are working. The people are delighted, so that's great. It's just the same as Maxine, if we can get an update as to when it's going to happen, because of course the usual, Ingrid, we start in one place and they moan about the next place, you know. So even if we could give them a sort of a loose time scale, it wouldn't be a proper time scale, but something like that, so we can update the people that keep asking us, if that would be manageable. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. And Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Pauline touched on it there as well. You know, if you get say a painter and decorator into your house, you look at one bit, oh, that's great, and then it moves on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and so it goes on. Excuse me, my phone ringing. Can you just hold on? Yeah, okay. Now, with regard to the, remember we met at Ash Hill, Ingrid? I haven't heard anything about that one at all. I don't know if that's in the plan for this year or next year. Remember we talked about a wee garden thing or whatever. Maybe that's, I'm just wondering if that's still in the go or not. And one last thing, one of the problems that we have on zebra crossings, we talk about speed, speed indicators. Do you get such a thing that can be erected at our zebra crossings as well? Maybe something you want to look at in the future to take in and an extra funding, because there's very, very near and close accidents happening in some of the zebra crossings. And I'd like to see that maybe be considered if we're looking at the smiley faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. From our ward, if I can just say how helpful it was to go around all our play parks as well. We did find that really useful to see the condition, but also for officers to explain to us where different issues arise, you know, point things out to us that we weren't aware of, and give us ideas on how to improve it. And as been suggested, it would be really helpful in our ward too if we just had a breakdown. I mean, as Maxine said, we don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it would be helpful for us because we're going to be asked the question of what's going to be done and when it's going to be done. So if we can get that detailed for each play park, so that we've just got that information to hand when we get asked the question, that with just a few bullet points even would be really handy to have, Ingrid.
That's not a problem. We have been working quietly away in the background, trying to gather all the costings and how we're going to move things around. There's some items that we would like in other areas that we were planning on moving, but as we're looking at them closer, it's a little bit more expensive than we thought. But yes, it's not a problem. I can get you a list of all the proposals and some timescales together. I would hope that we can start moving things as the start of the grass season comes in. Some of the officers are just at this moment in time, they're working through some of the sort of behind the scene kind of things, you know, changing oilets and shackles and getting some swings back up, sorting out some safety surfacing and that. So I would hope that we can get things moving in the summer in a really big way.
Okay, thank you. That's great, Ingrid. So what we're going to do now is we're going to approve all the proposed applications, and we'll agree to look further at smileys or different ways of monitoring and encouraging reduction in speed with the funding that's left. Is that okay, Helen? Fiona, do you need me to read through each of the recommendations? There's 10 for Crombie Firth and there's 9 for Tain and Easter Ross. Are you quite happy that we go with what's written there?
If you mean Fiona McVeigh, yes, I think that's fine. It's in the report, yes, that's fine.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is number 8. We're back onto the agenda numbers. Bridgend Primary School in Alness, traffic calming on Caplet Road and Ardross Road. So we've had the report circulated, pages 60 to 88. Ian Graham, the road safety officer, has come along. Thank you, Ian, for waiting and being patient. If you want to talk to anything in the report.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Just a bit of background. Obviously, the road safety team has been working with Bridgend Primary School on a safe routes to school scheme. We're looking to reduce the amount of vehicles that congest around Shilling Hill, Perrins Road, Avernon Road, Caplik Road. We've done some work with the school for the travel plan. At the current time, we have 114 pupils take cars to school and only 31 walk and 37 cycle. When we asked the pupils how many would like to walk or cycle was up to 123. So there is a demand there in relation to it. We worked with the parent council quite closely to try and identify areas that they would encourage their children or be happy for the children to walk. And the point on Springfield Terrace and Caprick Road was one of the main ones that they came in with. And we came up with a proposal through our design team to have a build out on both sides of the road, narrowing it down and having traffic coming from the top half to slow down at a give way and make way for the cars from the other side. The design proposals are built into the responses. We also looked at our Dross Road. Obviously, there's been an investment as part of the nursery expansion programme in relation to the disability access ramp. And to complement that and to allow people to negotiate the pavement on our Dross Road, we've designed a build out also to calm traffic both ways and encourage more people to use that access point. We did look at our ramp for Parents Road. You can see within the report, but the cost of that was coming back at £200,000, which wasn't viable. The funding comes from Safer Routes to School funding, which is part of the Scottish Government grant scheme. The proposals, as well as the one already passed for our Dross Road and High Street, would come in about £63,000 for the entire build. We think it would complement all the work we're doing in the area. We've had the number of residents on Caprick Road support the proposals, and obviously we've had the 2 objections. We've communicated with them, and they've been very helpful in detailing their objections, and we've had discussions with them, but the objections still stand. So quite happy to answer any questions on the Caprick Road or our Dross Road build-outs, and obviously get your opinion on whether you want to support the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. We don't have any questions or comments. Oh, we do. Maxine?
Sorry, I was too busy seeing what I wanted to ask you. Yeah, just probably then just take the objections and look at those, because this has been an issue for a long time, at least 15, 20 years. It's been an issue with safety on that, especially Perrins Road. And obviously that then involves the Ardross Road, because that's where it comes out of the giveaway. So I'm looking at the objections. I know that the person's made the observation that speed bumps don't particularly work and that, you know, they potentially can damage cars. But I mean, the idea is you don't damage cars if you go slowly over them. And I think we probably need the Ardross Road build out. And they are saying it's of no benefit, but I disagree. I think it is. And also the fact that we do get speeding on that road as it comes down, you know, into the town, into the 30 and then the 20, we do get speeding. So although I can understand that people obviously are quite entitled to object, I think on the whole, you know, we have to take things on balance and look at the overall good. And I think the overall good outweighs any sort of inconvenience with regard to those objections. So I'll be supporting the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maxine. So are members happy to approve the 3 recommendations, noting the background, the traffic calming measures and the representations, the construction of the traffic calming and the intention to monitor the area, which I think is really important after commissioning the traffic survey to determine the effectiveness of the new road layout. Members quite happy with that? Okay, so we'll approve those recommendations. Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Item number 9, the Housing Performance Report on pages 89 to 93. Rory McLeod, the Housing Officer, is here to answer any questions or comments that you do have. Rory, would you like to raise anything in particular?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the benefit of councillors, I'll take them through just a couple of points on the report, but I won't go through it in great depth. On table 2, you'll note that the average time to take to complete non-emergency repairs remains above the target, but across Highland and over time and in East of Ross, that trend is actually coming back down to our normal performance. Remains affected by the COVID lockdowns and delays caused caused through supply chain issues and access to trades while people were isolating. The rent arrears is trending back down to a more healthy level as well. So I'm thankful for the work of our housing management team in managing that. and the average relet time, there's a slight anomaly in the data in that there's an impact of turning over temporary properties into permanent, where someone's temporary accommodation suits them. That's reflected in the performance figure as a 0 days turnaround, and so it has a slight impact on the relet time in East of Ross, and I've accounted for that. Excluding those figures, it's 31.09 days and 30.27 days for Ward 6 and 7 respectively. But I'll open it up to questions now.
Thank you, Rory. Derek.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks, Rory, for the report. I think that my attention was drawn to the two things that you've spoken about, just not quite hitting the target for emergency repairs or for non-emergency repairs in our area in Tain and East of Ross. And on page 91, yeah, just to praise the work that the team have done to bring the rent arrears down. You know, I think all of us are pretty worried about what the future holds. But I think the work that's been done by the team at what is an immensely difficult time for our tenants, you know, is very commendable. So if you pass on my regards to the team for the work that they're doing, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you, Derek. Maxine.
Thank you, and thank you, Rory. Yeah, I would echo what Councillor Loudon said about your successes. But whilst I'm patting you on the back, I'm going to also encourage you to do more, because if we could bring that 285,000 and the 112,000 down even more, we'd have more money to spend on other things. So, you know, people should be paying their rents. It's not, you know, well, it's acceptable to be in arrears because people have to be and people struggle, but we should be seeing more of a balanced figure there, and you know, it should be breaking even and just have a little bit of arrears. So if I could still encourage your team to build on the success that they're obviously doing it right, but if they could do more of it, I'd love to see that figure down to something like, you know, 35,000 instead of 285. Thank you.
Polly.
Yeah, same. I would like to say the same as Derek. Really, he picked up on what I was about to ask about. But I would also like to say, if you could pass this on, Rory, to thank Kia Dale and Donna McKenzie over this last period, because I think the housing team are the most responsive team that I have dealt with in the council. I've never had to wait. They always answer me straight away. So I would like to pass that on, because I think that goes unnoticed quite a lot, and they work really, really hard. So, and I'm always delighted with the response I get from them. I get what Maxine's saying about the council rent, but unfortunately, I think we're just going to get worse because it's getting so difficult. And because we're running different food banks and everything like that and delivering food, we can see who it's hitting the most, and it is the ones that are already in arrears. So that, good luck with that, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. It's great, but oh, yeah, good luck.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, I just want to go along with my colleagues there, and I must say that the housing team over the years has been steadily improving, I must say, and it really is a good team you've got there. My mind goes back to a long time ago when, and it's improved vastly over the years. Not that the folk in those days weren't doing a good job. It's just that the finances seem to be a wee bit better here. But Pauline and I, we were raising issues maybe about 6 months ago, and some work has been done on this, and it's to do with the actual responsibility for the pavements and car parks within housing estates. And I'm just wondering, has there ever been an answer to that with regard to the maintenance? Because some of the folk are really tripping over very bad pavements. Can't get moving on it. And also we had a program for HRA. I don't think, you know, it's just one to raise these issues. And some of these things we agreed on have not been carried out. But I'm just wondering if you can give us a wee bit of an update on the HRA that we talked about maybe 2 years ago. I hope that's not reflecting on my praising of the housing team, and I don't mean it to at all.
Thank you, Mike. Pauline, did you want to come back here?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona, for letting me back. Sorry to jump back in again.
No
but I was
problem.
wondering, Rory, could you maybe ask Jackie Hutchison if she could get in touch with me, because I still don't have the house in Milnafua, and we're getting evicted from the hall shortly because, as you know, it's condemned, and we need somewhere to put our food and everything that we run our food bank from Action for Children. Would you do that? Thanks, Rory. Thanks, Fiona, for allowing that.
No problem, Polly. If I can just add in a few comments there, Rory, just very much what everybody has said, so we can say it on behalf of the committee, that we've all had a really good response from housing. It is getting better and better, and they are possibly the most responsive service within Highland Council. And Mark's here today, so I think it's important that he realises that as well. What a difference that makes to our job. As you can imagine, you know, people come to us and sometimes they're in very dire situations, you know, and they can be really upset and it's affecting their life. And if we can't get a response from officers and then go back to them, you know, that can be tragic at times. We really do need the housing service to operate as efficiently as they do, and they certainly do. They're so quick at coming back. They're so helpful. They often go that extra mile, which is really important. And I think lots of services could probably learn from housing and improve the way that they have done. But also to comment about the rent arrears, and it is great that it is coming down. The team are doing a great job. Like Pauline, I worry that it's probably only going to get worse because, you know, we've got a lot ahead of us. It's not like things are improving in terms of the economy. So it is a great worry what's facing us in the future. But just to congratulate the team on what they're doing and thank them, you know, for everything that they do on behalf of the councillors and to improve Highland Council. So Rory and Mark. Mark's got his hand up. Will I go to Mark first?
Yeah, I won't dwell too long. I just want to say thank you very much for the support for the team. Rory and I would both say feel free to say that as much as you like in front of as many people. Sometimes housing is looked upon as being a bit of a Cinderella service. People don't really understand the breadth and width of what's involved in it. I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I was a housing officer when I started out for a long time. So it's really pleasing to hear that. But, you know, it's not just about rent and repairs. It's bricks and mortar is important, but it's about people in place as well. And actually a very large amount of things that we do as a service are particularly supporting some of the vulnerable clients that Pauline talked about in her own experience through food banks. And so we are almost in that sort of quasi social work sort of space, but at the level below the sort of statutory thresholds. And that's something I would reflect on, seeing a massive change in the 30 years now. I feel like an old so-and-so saying this, in the 30 years I've been working in housing, I've seen a massive change in that. And that sometimes goes under the wire because some of the things we have to say to people are actually really difficult conversations, quite challenging, unpleasant, about behaviours and about consequences of doing things like not paying rents and not getting on with your neighbours or just behaving in unacceptable ways. And so to hear it reflected so positively despite some of those challenges is actually a really nice thing for, I think, both Roy and I to hear. So thank you very much, members. I can assure you it's hugely appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Rory.
Yeah, I'll start by echoing Mark's words. Thank you for your support for the housing team. I will make sure to pass it on. It's not always a daily occurrence for a housing officer to be told they're doing a great job, and sometimes that's because they're doing a great job. It can be very difficult. Mark touched on the difficult conversations and difficult interactions we've had. We have with some quite vulnerable people in some very stressful circumstances. So I won't dwell on that too much, but I will go through a couple of points. Councillor Loudon, just to clarify on the emergency repairs rather than the non-emergency repairs, the emergency repairs, we are actually achieving our target. but it's the non-emergency repairs that we've been struggling with over COVID. We've maintained a strong focus on emergency repairs to make sure that they're prioritised. And also on the non-emergency repairs, we do review open work orders to make sure that anything that needs to be prioritised to completion can be. But thank you for raising that. I accept what councillors are saying about the need to do more on rents. We are alive to the challenges that our tenants face with heating costs and other pressures. And unfortunately, we're not in a position to subsidise the costs of that are imposed by private power companies, but we are in a position to support our tenants as much as possible, and certainly appreciate councillor support in dealing with that. Also, Councillor Finlayson, I think it was asking about the environmental works budget. What I'll do is I'll commit to talking to my colleagues in the repairs and maintenance side about coming toward business and reviewing the works that councillors have agreed and seeing where we're up to with them. I do know there's been some work on environmental works. On the specific subjects about footpaths and car parks in council estates, we do have a number of footpaths that we are directly responsible for. In general terms, they're the ones that go between houses or across the green spaces, where we have an overlaying housing revenue account title. And the car parks that come off the street, we generally have a responsibility for them where there's an overlaying housing revenue account title. But we can certainly clarify that on a site-by-site basis if there's particular issues that councillors want to raise.
Thank you. In Tain and Easter Ross, we did use our environmental budget to improve the pavements. We laid tar in Mansfield Estate and it's made a big difference. So it might be something you want to look at, Mike, for your areas and using your budget in that way. Okay, so thank you, Rory. Members agree to, we don't have to approve the report, just that we've noted the report. Okay, moving on to item number 10, which is garage rents. The committee is invited to agree a level of rent increase to apply to Easter Ross garages and garage sites. So the report's in front of us on pages 94 to 96.
Thank you, Chair. So that's me again. The report's there in front of you. We're recommending a 1% increase in rents in line with the increase in council house rents that was approved by the Housing and Property Committee earlier in the year. That amounts to 10p for a garage that is rented to a council tenant, or 12p for a garage rented to a non-council tenant. The difference in those costs is VAT. Council tenants are VAT exempt when they rent a garage from us. We've modelled a 1% increase and a 1.5% increase, but the actual decision for the increase is devolved down to area committees for garages in their area. I'm happy to take any questions now. Okay, thank you, Rory. I would certainly recommend the 1%, no higher than 1%. I think we're looking at increases all over the board coming in future. I think this is one that we shouldn't go any higher than 1%, and that's certainly what I would recommend. Maxine and then Pauline.
Thank you. I agree with 1%. I probably would have actually kept it the status quo. In fact, maybe I might put forward that motion. I'll think about it in the next few minutes. And the reason I say that is because our garages are not up to scratch. The only garages that are decent are any that have been built in the last 10 years, and I don't think there are any. Now, I wonder where we are with the report that Jim Holden had started before Rory came, and I'm sure he would have passed on stuff. So maybe we could have that report back to another committee in the future, which is probably going to be after the election. But the report was about looking at which garages were fit for purpose, which weren't, which needed to be demolished, what we could do to replace them or not, as you know, would seem fit, looking at options appraisals for the spaces where the garages may occur if we demolish them, and also looking at the use of them, because I think we were finding that at least 50% of them were not being used for cars. In fact, can't even fit a modern car in and open the doors. So most of them were being used for storage. And so the other thing to look at in the options appraisal was, do we replace some of the older garages with storage units and rent those out instead? And you know, they would be fit for purpose, and I'm sure they would be really popular actually. So could we get that report after the election? Hopefully I'm still here, and then we can discuss it in the future. Thank you.
Okay, Pauline.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing about the report, Maxine, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. I don't have a problem with the 1% for the ones that are decent. If you go around some of these places where we live and these garages are, I mean, I've reported a few quite often about the state that they're in. So if we're going to increase something, we have to at least try and make it look a bit better, because they are a mess. And as Maxine said, lots of them, especially in the older housing estates, the garages, you can't get a car in half of them. They're so small, but they are absolutely full to the brim with storage. We have kids wrecking the top of them. There's just so much wrong with a lot of them. So that's my only issue with the 1%. I don't have a problem with it if it's in good condition and people are happy with it, but some of them, oh, they're not worth an increase. So that's just my opinion. So thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, I remember Jim doing the report in the garages, and remember raising the issue, which carries on from what Maxine was saying about the alternative use for garages. And I've had inquiries over the years from people wanting to maybe start up a small business within the housing estates. And the conversion of the garages, I thought perhaps it might be worthwhile looking at. Maybe knocking 2 garages into one. You could have a wee hairdressers or whatever, you know, in the housing estate, and that's all helping the community to a great extent. I think the 1% has already been agreed. Maybe Mark would clarify that at the main committee. I'm not sure, or if it's just housing rents.
Yeah, but it was just housing, not garage, Mike. Okay, just before we move to Mark, Maxine.
Yeah, so I've had a think about whether I put a motion, and I think I do actually want to put a motion that we retain the status quo, that we maybe take an unprecedented move and don't put the garages up this year. And that is because it will be pending an options appraisal and outline business case for what we do with our old garages in the future. So that might hurry up that report and we can look at it, because any increase we do not put this year will be, you know, increased in the future, because we'll give them something that they really do want, and then they won't mind paying it. So given COVID and everything else, I am going to propose that we keep the status quo and do not put the garage rents up this year, and I seek a seconder. Maybe Pauline might, I don't know. Yes, she's putting thumbs up, thank you.
Okay, just before we take any decisions on that, I'll move to Mark, who's got his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It's a perennially difficult challenge, and whilst I fully appreciate the comments made about the condition of some of the garages and the size of them, I mean, it changes stuff you've heard me say before, so there's nothing new in me saying it here again. The challenge is, if we don't increase our revenue stream, we're never going to get to a situation where we have substantial enough amount of money behind it to do something that makes a real difference. You know, a new garage door could be £1,000 for the sake of argument. So we do need to consider that. That said, I mean, I do actually broadly agree with most of what Maxine said. You know, the report needs to come back and we need to look at it in a strategic way, much in the same way as we've been looking at the non-HRA buildings, and indeed as we will be doing across the whole of the housing stock in due course. It's looking at actually what works, what's washing its face, bringing in sufficient revenue to cover not only the day-to-day running costs, but actually what the future investment needs are for these properties. And that's the same, whatever kind of property you're talking about across the council, whether that's a school or a garage or a council house. The important thing isn't just getting the capital together to build it in the first place. It's actually how do you maintain it over the life of the asset over that full 60 years. And we've got some challenges in that regard outside of housing, which I'm not going to dwell on because my pain there is well known to everybody. But it is the same sort of concept generally. So I think we do need to bring it back, but we do need to have an honest conversation about that. In the scheme of things, having a freeze this year doesn't make a huge amount of difference, frankly, because it's only 10 pence a week across the number of garages, and you've got relatively few here. That's a political decision, so I'm not going to dig myself any deeper a hole by making any further comment on that. What I would say from a strategic point of view when it comes back, we need to perhaps be alive to the principle of having a conversation about a considerable increase in future years if we are going to make them fit for purpose, because the alternative, which might be to argue that we should redistribute some of the capital investment that goes across the rest of HRA activities, is, I'm going to say to you, very challenging in the context of the cost that it's likely to be to the council to get to low or zero carbon across its housing stock. Given the age of our housing stock, on average 50, 60, 70 years, all the different construction types of it, the cost per unit of bringing it up to standard and making it energy efficient, particularly pertinent given the direction of travel of utilities, for example, is well known. So our ability to cross-subsidise improving garages from the rest of our operational activities and housing is very limited. So I'm perfectly comfortable with either of the options, whether we freeze it or whatever. That doesn't really matter today. It's not a big deal one way or the other, but I'm teeing it up, I suppose, to say we're going to have an honest and fairly challenging conversation about what we do with garages in the future. Post-election is probably the right time for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. That's good points. There's many, many, many more garages if you look at the difference between Ward 6 and Ward 7 in your ward in Cromty-Firth than there is in Tain and Easter Ross. So it's much more of a challenge for you. It's much more important, has much more impact on what's done or what's not done in your area than it does mine. I must admit, one of my thoughts was to freeze it as well. I thought the very most we should go up with 1%. So I'm fairly comfortable with actually putting a freeze on it and not increasing the rent. As Mark says, we have to look at it in the future. You know, if we're going to improve them, we need to find the money to do that. But then we need to look at other uses, and we need to look at what we want to achieve from the garages, which is not anything much we're achieving at the moment. And we need to make them much more fit for purpose or fit for a different purpose. Whether that's storage or whatever. So I think it's a whole area that we have to look into. But I'm quite happy to support a freeze if that's what the committee want to do. As I say, it's much more Cromty-Firth than it is Tain and Easter Ross, the impact on that. So Maxine?
Yeah, if I could just talk to my motion a bit more now I've heard from Mark. I totally agree that we need to do something and we need to have a serious conversation. But you know what? Even if we put the garage rents up 50% next year, it will take us years to have enough money to sort the garage situation. So that's not my proposal. I'm not expecting you or the HRA to find money to regenerate, rebuild or whatever, or reuse the spaces where our garages are. I don't think you can. The council should have thought of that many, many decades ago, and it didn't. In many of its ways, it didn't think about cyclical maintenance on the housing stock or anything, and it's only just really started thinking about that in the last 5 to 10 years. So there's no way we're going to fix our garages by using the rent that's come in for them. And why should we expect people to pay a huge amount of rent for something that's not fit for purpose just to help other people in the future? They're not going to do that. So I would suggest that as members, we look for other funding streams to take this forward. And it might be that we go to the environmental budget that Fiona mentioned earlier, that you charge your payments with. And that's a small budget, so that's not going to hit it either. But we know we're getting funding streams coming forward from Scottish Government and maybe Westminster in the future, and we've seen them now. So maybe we look at what we do and take a strategic look and say, right, we'll take that area and we will put money into those 10 garages and we'll start a pilot and see what that looks like. And then we do the outline business case and say, well, if that was storage, we'd be bringing in X amount per week, and that would keep that going for the next 60 years. So I'm going to be quite controversial and say that we're not expecting the HRA to fund this, because you can't. You can only do what you can do. And so I propose, along with the freezing of it and the status quo just now, that we bring back this options appraisal, an outline business case, and then we actively ourselves as members, and Helen is here so she can help us look where we can find little pockets of funding to take forward whatever results we get from the options appraisal. Thank you.
Okay, Maxine, I would fully support that, with the exception of at all touching our environmental budget. We need every single penny of that, and the difference that we make in Mansfield Estate in particular, but also down in Ballantor with our environmental budget, is phenomenal. Repairing pavements is much more important than dealing with the garages, and that's the kind of thing we do with our environmental budget. So I would say hands off that. You can't touch that, but happy to look at other options that there are. Mark?
Thanks very much. Again, it's a constructive input, so thanks for that. I think it's very much the right way forward. I'm always more than willing to spend other people's money. It's the best kind of activity I love doing the most. But I have to just interject a note of caution. I will need to check on the funding arrangements for investment in garage. HRA is a ring-fenced budget, if you like. So there are some complex accounting rules about what I'm allowed to spend on HRA assets such as housing and garages, but I don't need to put a damper on it anyway. I completely agree with Maxine in principle. So as far as it's possible for us to do that, we will look to leverage in money from wherever we can get our hands on it, frankly, but we will just need to check the technicalities of where that money can be sought from and what can be spent on what that is an HRA asset with our technical advisors in accountancy and law, but in principle, no issues at all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Mike?
Yeah, generally speaking, I'm in agreement with what has been said there. We have spent some of our environmental monies before, HRA monies, on improving pavements and flagstones and all that sort of stuff. So yes, that money's there, and it's very important that we retain it. I was just wondering if Mark or Rory could say, you know, this 10p, it's 1%, but how much money is involved in that? And is this not an issue that should be looked at as the overall Highland area rather than just areas on garage rents? Because it's going to cause a bit of a problem, I'd have thought, for housing. If there's no increase here, well, we'll be talking about 10p a week or whatever it is, but there's if it's none here and what's happening in Caithness and all that sort of stuff, is that going to cause a problem or not? So it's just before we do a decision on that. Can we get that
Mike,
on?
if you go to page 96, you'll see the impact of the increase, what the current rent is and what the new weekly rent would be, and you can see how much more additional income that would be brought in. So the figures are there, with a 1% and a 1.5%.
Can you
page 96
remind me
of your papers?
Remind me of what it is.
There's different options. There's a table there with all different options.
Yeah, I said it, but I don't have it here because I can't work the computer out to get the report.
Sit and read them all out. There's the garage rent for council tenants. There's the garage rent for non-council tenants.
Yeah,
there's Ward 6 and Ward 7. Do you really want me to read all these figures out?
No,
two
no,
big
no.
tables. Okay, good.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
So what a 1% increase, the weekly rent, the annual income would be 189,259.20, or the new weekly rent would be 191,151 pounds 79. The difference between one and the other is, I haven't got a calculator in front of me.
About £1,500.
Right, £1,500. That's what we would lose if we don't put the increase in of 1%.
Less the cost of putting the letters out to advise the tenants.
Good point, very good point, Derek. So we're not talking about an awful lot of money that's going to make an awful lot of difference, and I think that's why Mark could say he was quite okay with it, really. Mark, would you like to add anything in?
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty right, and Derek makes a valid point. Once you offset the cost of the postage, it's really it's a negligible difference, so a year isn't going to matter. I just wanted to pick up on Michael's point there about, you know, is it challenging if you decide to do something different? Well, sometimes these decisions can be challenging, other times not. I don't think this one is A, particularly challenging, but B, that's the whole point of local democracy. You've asked for devolved budgets and devolved budget making responsibility to be given to you. So we come along and we give you the benefit of our advice or our comments, as we have done today, and then you take a competent decision, whatever that is, and you stand or fall by whatever your decisions are. I think this is perfectly reasonable in the circumstances. Part of me thinks if I was taking a sort of total strategic asset management approach, might it make more sense to do these things on a pan-Highland basis? You can make that argument, but the bottom line is, in order to make that kind of thing work, you always end up coming down to the area committees anyway and having that conversation in exactly the same way we will be when we're talking about asset rationalisation on the property side of things. We'll be coming out. In fact, I've already been to one area committee and I'm going to the next two over the next 2 or 3 months now, be coming around all of you individually. So we'd always end up having to have that level of engagement anyway. I think we've got a good compromise between the stuff that needs to be done at a totally strategic level and being able to do things like have an environmental budget within housing done at a local level to talk about being able to set rents and to influence things at a local level. I think you could see how it might be a model that some people might think could turn into a bit of a guddle, but over the 2 years I've been here, it's actually worked very well. And I don't think there's any particular problem in continuing in the way that we've been doing it. It seems to work well for me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. And it does make a point, which is really behind it, particularly for Cromarty Firth Ward and the condition of their garages. So, Maxine, we would need your motion. Have you written it down? If you could put it in the chat.
Oh, I'll put it in the chat in a second. Yeah, I just want to say, I don't know, I must have my entrepreneurial hat on today, but I think of our own committee, East Ross Committee, as kind of leading in area committees across Highland. Because after all, everybody followed us on the play park idea and invested more money into them, as did Scottish Government, which was good. So I would like to say that if Mark does discover that within the HRA budget he can't attract other funding into the garages, then I would suggest that maybe in our own ward or yours as well, we take a pilot and we have an asset transfer and we transfer some of the garages to like a common good fund where we would be able to attract funding. So it's a thought for the future, and with all these new funding streams coming on board, I'm really excited by that prospect. Because when we come on to the next item about the Bouchard on bust, you know, I would like to obviously comment on that. But if we're going to do asset transfers and things like that, we need to put the business case and say, yeah, let's do this and let's get some money in back for the community. So anyway, just a thought. Thank you. And my motion, I will type while you have somebody speaking, hopefully.
Okay, if you could type that in, Maxine, for Fiona. I
There's
think.
Nothing stopping the idea of asset transfer at all. I mean, I've done that with non-viable housing stock in my previous authority, where it was uneconomic for us to repair it. We sold that on the open market to people who were struggling in terms of affordability, but had enough to come in and be able to do it up. So, you know, the concept of being able to do an asset transfer, if you like, at some value in the way that Maxine describes it is actually quite an interesting concept, and one which I think would be within our gift to do. We would just have to get the balance right between the local priority here and the strategic requirements of the HRA in the whole, but I don't think that would be difficult to overcome after some discussions. So that's, again, there's been some really good contributions today in this, so thank you, members.
That's true, and I would certainly consider the transfer to the Tane Common Good Fund if that were to move ahead, but we'd have to be very careful it's not liabilities that we would be taking on. And we've got the management of the Common Good Fund, and we get charged all the time, anything that actually takes place. So we've got those charges to look at. So yeah, I would think it's a big discussion that you would have to have. But certainly it's a discussion that could be had. Yeah.
I'm happy to get a review site by site of all of the garage stances in your wards and come to ward business meetings, so that councillors can come to a view on how they want to proceed with that. Some of that will include the assessments of the condition of the garages. I can say that there is we do have to repair garages when they're tenanted. It's part of the tenancy agreement. We've got an obligation to do that. So if you're aware of specific garages that we haven't got to, I'm happy for you to send me information on those, and I can share that with my repairs colleagues. Part of the issue with garages has been that when compared to house repairs, they haven't been a priority in particular, but it is on us to identify what the condition of our garages what the condition of our garages is, and how to bring them up to use. And I take the point on the actual amenity of garages that might be too small for modern vehicles. We need to review those stances as well. And I'm happy to go to board business with that information and report back to the committee.
Thank you, Rory. So Maxine's put her motion in there. I'll just read it for you. We retain the status quo for the garage rents, so effectively a rent freeze, giving due consideration to bringing back a report as soon as possible on the viability of garage stock and an options appraisal for their use and continuity. And Pauline's happy to second that. So Mike, Derek, are you quite happy with that motion? Yeah. Okay, so we'll move that. Fiona, are you quite happy with that?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 11, which is the Invergordon Common Good Fund on pages 97 to 104. And the committee is invited to note four different recommendations, with one of them where we have an option to look at. So first I'll move to Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wasn't going to pick up anything on the accounts that are presented, or the quarterly monitoring statement, or the budget for next year, because that's very much business as usual. I don't think there'll be any surprises for members in any of that content. But obviously there was significant discussion last time about the potential to sell the Bouchardon bust in order to raise money to refurbish the town hall. We have had some discussions since that last meeting, Mark, myself, some High Life colleagues, etc., and also legal colleagues. So firstly, it's clear that it can be competent to sell the bust if that's in the interests for the community. So basically, if the funds raised would result in a benefit, and the discussion last time was of course about that being to refurbish the town hall. The other point that came up in discussions is that clearly a refurbished town hall would be a better town hall. It would be more efficient. It would be cheaper to run, but it would still have running costs, and therefore to get that benefit, it would have to be refurbished and with a robust business plan. And obviously, as members know, that's an area where we really struggled to get a robust plan, so there's an issue there. So it's competent, but there are issues to be considered in terms of the use of the funds. We've also had some initial discussions about other implications of sale and how other funders like the Heritage Lottery could apply, and there's some information in the report for members. I mean, it's clear that you can have a sale that's regarded as ethical, but again, the reasons for that sale need to be really clear. Otherwise, it's likely to be regarded as unethical. Now, obviously, the museum is held through High Life Highland. The Bouchardon bust is not, it's stored there, but it's not held by the museum, it's held by the council. So it's quite a complex set of issues to consider, but hopefully the report gives you a little bit more context. But that's why we've very much come back to members with the option if you want to consider the bust, it would of course trigger a statutory consultation, and that consultation, it's very hard to see how one would want to go out a consultation without a reason for selling the bust, i.e. what would that money be used for? And again, then you're back to the requirement for that robust business case. The other option, of course, is to simply revert to considering the town hall, and given the total lack of response to the consultation about sale second time around, members are also able to approve the continuation of that process if they're so minded. So that's all I'll add, but I'm happy to answer any questions on any of that.
Okay, thank you, Helen. We've got Maxine first, then Pauline.
Okay, so when you discussed the Bouchardon bus last time, I'd had to leave the meeting, so I wasn't involved in that discussion. So I was a bit surprised when I heard about it, but I'll come to that in a second. I want to say option 2 first, and that is to recommend that the Highland Council dispose of the Invergordon Town Hall by sale. I would also like to include in that recommendation, comma, and I'll type this in later, after after considerable years of being unable to bring in sufficient use to make its continuity viable. So that's going to be in the motion, but I'll put that. The reason being, 10 years ago, we started trying to look at uses for the town hall. We gave it a good shot, getting people involved in trying to see what it could be used for and bringing revenue to start tackling the roof that's falling in and the sandstone that's falling off it, not to mention the refurbishment that would be required inside. We couldn't find a suitable use for it. Nobody wanted to engage. And as much as the community might say, what a shame, we loved it when it was a cinema. Yeah, you did then, because that was all you had. But, you know, you ask your children now, do they want to go to the old town hall and watch an old film, or do they want to go to My View and get their popcorn and everything else? You know, there's no competition. So it's not going to be used for anything like that ever again. There was a group about 7-8 years ago that did start putting on the odd film here and there, and there was a limited use to it, but that came to an end because it wasn't sustainable. People didn't want it. So we had the Invergordon Development Trust that then came along about 3 or 4 years ago and said, we're going to save the town hall, to which the public went, yeah, great, yeah, we want you to. And they got petitions and everything else, and yeah, everybody wanted it saved. But again, they couldn't come up with a suitable use for it. Nobody wanted to engage in renting out rooms or using it for any purpose that was going to bring in any financial reward that would anywhere near even break even. So it just isn't viable. So in my mind, you've got two options. You kind of let it go to rack and ruin. The sandstone will fall off. The roof's already caving in and it's having to be repaired bit by bit, even by volunteers offered to repair it because it was so awful. So you'd end up with a situation like the old church, the old Roskeen church, that is falling to pieces and that is in the middle of a cemetery, so its uses are limited, and the council own that but can't do anything with it, can't afford to repair it. So you would end up that the townhouse that is on the high street would fall into disrepair and not be used for anything. So I would much rather see the facade of the building kept, the roof repaired, the walls and everything repaired, and then inside it be something different. Yes, it's going to be owned by a private person or company, and it's probably going to be a dwelling, but you know, at least that keeps the old town hall there and people can see what it used to look like. You've got Neptune's statue on top that would be repaired, and so basically that's why it's been valued at £1. Its only value is £1 because really it has a deficit value. You know, if you had to say how much it would cost to redevelop it, it's probably going to be somewhere between £500,000 to £1 million, and nobody's going to do that from the public side of things. It has to be a private developer that can invest for the future. So that's where I'm coming from, the option of the town hall. Option 2, yes, dispose of it, but I'll write down that extra bit I'd like in it so that people understand why we're disposing of it. That brings me to, and I'm sorry, I've probably gone over my 5 minutes.
I know, I'm going to ask you to.
Do you want me to stop and come back in later for option 1, or do you want me to carry on?
Just finish
yeah.
what you're
So
going to say.
option 1, the Bouchard on bus, which I discovered many years ago, 1998 in actual fact, was holding open a door near Ballintor there, and its value was unknown. And since then, it's got a huge value, and I'm going to get Helen to clarify what it's now valued at, 'cause I've forgotten. But I know it's over £1 million. And yeah, I've talked about selling it, but the reason I wanted to sell it was to get a replica made of it, so we could put it in the local museum, but also so that we could use that money for a common good fund. So with that common good fund, I don't want it just sitting there growing a little bit of interest. I want an outline business case, an options appraisal of what we could use that money for. So I don't want to commence a statutory consultation to sell the Bouchard on bus to repair the town hall, but what I would like to do is to commence an options appraisal and an outline business case, which will involve a wider consultation on people's input on what we could use money for. If we had a substantial amount of money in Invergordon to start off a common good fund, like say we had £1 million or more, what could we use that for to bring in revenue every single year? That might be we build houses or flats, or it might be we open a business, whatever. We need to look at that and involve the public in what they might, want to see that use for. So again, would like to change option 1. So I'll leave you all to talk while I type into the chat what I'd like to see in the options, if that's okay, Fiona.
Yeah, Maxine, if you type that up so that we've got that to work on. Next to speak is Pauline.
Yeah, this is a really, really difficult one for us as members. I have to be honest with you, because of course we'd have loved to save the town hall. We all would. But the problem we have is that we can't leave it the way it is. It's falling to pieces literally in front of our eyes, and that's also quite sad. I was really disappointed at the lack of the local input, actually. I was hoping that that would maybe revitalise us all into trying to do something else, and if somebody came up with a plan, but there wasn't any. I mean, I've only been a local councillor for 5 years, so I've not been as involved with the rest of my colleagues in it. But certainly with the Invergordon Development Trust, they came along, they were enthusiastic, they tried their best. They just could not get a business plan to work. And that's my biggest problem, is that if we can't keep something that's so beautiful and not do anything with it, number one, we don't want to. Oh, do you know what? Sorry, I'm babbling, because it's a really, really difficult one for us, because we all love it. It's beautiful. And I'd much rather see somebody come along, and because I think I'm right in saying that the front of the building's listed. So we'd actually keep the building looking much better if we had somebody that would come along and do something to it. I do get that there's a lot of memories in there for a lot of people locally in Invergordon, and I am conscious of that. But, at some point we have to move this on. Selling the bust, for me, would be the wrong move, because I would much rather, if we were selling the bus, get the money put right back in the local community for the community, fixing paths, fixing roads, fixing things that we can fix with money, rather than us sitting on something that, we can put this off and put it in the long grass forever and ever, and nothing will happen. But anyway, I'll let you all discuss it and see what everyone says.
Okay, thank you, Pauline. Derek.
Yes. I think I better clarify why I did what I did that day. That day, Maxine had to leave the meeting, and I didn't know what her opinion on it was. So basically what I did was I kicked the can down the road, much to the annoyance of the officers. And it turned out the local members who were quite happy for this to proceed. So I won't be attempting any more can kicking today, and I'll support whatever local members in Ward 6 want to do as the way forward.
Mike.
Okay, it's about 6 months now since this was raised already. I was hoping that because of the publicity and people listening in would have maybe spurred them on to do something. Nothing's happened. Officials have had meetings. Nothing's happened. We just can't go on like that. The opportunity has been given to maintain it and to keep it going, but I would have thought that perhaps if the bus was sold and we had some sort of affirmation or decision that the town hall was going to be used for a very good purpose, for example, museum or whatever else, community staff, then I'd probably go down that road. But in the meantime, I think what we've got to do now is just look with just be obviously aware that we just can't plough money into it if there's not going to be a future for it. And especially, the fact that the facade is going to be kept, well, that's great news. I think it would make quite a nice hotel or whatever else, but then that's up to whoever buys it. But there we are, and I'm afraid not afraid, but I'll just be going along with, I think we'll wait and see what Maxine's got here, but we'll probably go along with that.
Mark.
So this is a challenging situation because you've got an old asset which you own, which at the moment you haven't got any money to do anything with, but you do have an asset that you might be able to realise, which should help offset the liabilities that have arisen over a number of years. And that's one aspect to point out. Yes, I think probably actually the sensible thing to do would be to dispose of it. But that's assuming that anybody wants to buy it. And so it's going to be quite challenging, so I'm just going to say it. If nobody buys it, the common good's still got a liability that it needs to address. Now, there has been some discussion in the past about, well, just pass it back to Highland Council as opposed to the common good to deal with. It will not get dealt with. If it comes back to me, I will mothball the building, I'll shut it up, because there's no capital programme allowance for it in the next 15 years. And I have insufficient revenue budget already as it stands at the moment to cover all my schools, never mind all of the other assets. So be no doubt about it, there is no money available from my budgets to be able to do this. And I would make the point that's probably not going to make me very popular. You've got a liability, but you've also got an asset you can realise to discharge all of that liability and then some on top. And so I would suggest to you that, yes, sell it is the best thing. But if you can't sell it, you're going to have to address that liability, because it will not be able to be passed back to me. It will just be ending up being steel shut and left on minimum tick over, because that's the situation that the council is in terms of its property budgets. So actually, maybe in the longer term, in an ideal world, you'd find someone to buy it for £1, realise the bust. You've got £1.5 million there. What a difference that could make across the piece in terms of a common good fund. That's great. But what I'm saying to you is, you might have a compromise situation where nobody buys it. You've still got £500,000 bill on the townhouse, but you're still nearly £1 million better off than you thought you were in terms of money you can invest back into your community. And so, again, there's no right or wrong answers. I'm giving an opinion, but I am being very clear that there is no resource available from my budget to pick up this liability, and the liability does sit with the common good as it stands at the minute. And as long as it has an asset that it can realise to offset that liability, and it can more than cover that liability, then my view is it properly should look to realise that asset and deal with its liabilities that exist. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I think, as you say, there is no right and wrong answer within this, and it is down to the local members who know their own area. I think I said the same at the last area committee meeting. I think you had made your feelings quite clear, and certainly I've had discussions with Helen over the last few meetings, so I did know about the situation in the area, and that there was nobody coming forward, and that it would be a liability for your area. So I certainly agree with all the discussions that have been going on, and the option to sell it. Maxine has put additional chat to the options in the chat here. Maxine, do you want to add anything before I read that out?
Yeah, I wonder if you'd like Mike to come in first, and then I'll come back and speak to my motion at the end.
Okay, yeah. Mike, do you have another point to add?
Yes, it was just a bit of clarification from what Mark was speaking about there with regard to the actual. I've been advised or told by an official, rightly or wrongly, that the hall is owned by Highland Council at this time, but whether that's right or not, I don't know. Quite a high, and I didn't ask him specifically, but that's what I was told. And secondly, with regard to the what did you mention there about the sale of the bust? I think actually, yes. Have we got an affirmation that money can be spent in Invergordon, or will Highland Council pull it into their coffers? I know we're all shaking our heads, but we just want a notice of that. Is that true? Thank you.
Mark.
In my understanding, and I'm perfectly happy to take that away and have a look at it, I hadn't been previously aware that it was ever disputed that the town hall is actually a common good property, but I'm more than happy to, just in the interest of absolute completeness, double check that out. But I mean, I suppose in some ways, it doesn't massively change the answer I've just given you. If by some fluke of the circumstance it actually turns out it's not common good and it is mine, it's not in the capital programme in the next 15 years, unless the new council, when it's formed, decides to change the currently approved capital programme and put it in. So at the minute, if it is mine, there is no money to capital invest in it, and there is insufficient revenue money to deal with it. So it would be a case I would be proposing to mothball it in that situation. If, on the other hand, it is actually a common good asset still, and you've got other assets that actually provide the cover for the works needing to be done by 2 or 3 to 1 ratio, then just in the same way that I have to look at that and say, here's all my liabilities and here's the money or the assets I've got available to realise to look after them. That's what you would have to do as a common good, in my view. You know, you have an asset that's more than covering the cost of your liability. It's not unreasonable to expect that asset to be realised to cover that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Helen. I
just wanted to come in on the point of the common good. I mean, it's always been believed to be common good, and Sarah Murdoch obviously has done good work, and I think that as far as I'm aware, she's got evidence that it is, so there isn't any doubt. But obviously the common good is held by Highland Council, so I think sometimes when people use the words interchangeably, but it's held by Highland Council as part of the common good. So it is, you know, it has that borough boundary attached to it.
Thank you, Helen. Mike, is that an old hand?
Yes, sorry.
That's good. Okay, Maxine, do you want to finally come in now?
Yeah, sorry, I had to keep disappearing. One of my dogs managed to find the cat munchies. Open the box all over the floor. Yeah, so they both are common good fund. We've extensively researched both, and Helen has been involved in that, so we know they are. Yeah, and even if it was the council, as you say, you wouldn't be doing anything with it anyway. We really have explored this over a 10-year period, and you know, we're left with no option. So that's what we'll do. And as for somebody wanting to buy it, you know, I've noticed lately that there are quite a few local firms that are buying up old buildings and making use of them. And I am absolutely certain that will happen. And as for the Bouchardon bust and its viability and sale, several years ago, La Louvre in France was interested in it. So, you know, I think we could have a buyer for that too. Might even put it to auction at, yeah, Sotheby's, that would be good. Okay, so my motions are there to add that first bit into option 2 and to add that second bit into option 1. I'm sorry, it's not the best grammatical sentences in the world, but I just typed it off the cuff.
I'll just read it out, Maxine, for clarity. So option 2, to recommend to Highland Council to dispose of Invergordon Town Hall by sale. This allows the concluded consultation regarding disposal and would include a requirement for approval from the Sheriff Court as it is an inalienable asset, and then to add in by sale after considerable years of attempting to bring it into viable use to provide sufficient income for its continued use. Okay, is everyone quite happy that we would add that in? Pauline?
Yes, okay, I think I read it wrongly, Fiona. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay, so we'd add that into option 2. And option 1 says to commence a statutory consultation to sell the Bouchardon bus to repair the town. Well, we'd actually have to change that. So changing it altogether, taking the words out.
Yeah, changing it completely, yeah.
To commence work on an options appraisal and outline business case for a use of any seed corn money returned from the sale of the Bouchardon bus, i.e. setting up of an Invergordon Common Good Fund, which would generate substantial income for the community to use for local projects for the future. Helen?
I don't think there's a problem here because obviously this is about doing an options appraisal. So the recommendation would be about that, not at this stage about any sale. But if we are to consider sale, we would need to do the statutory consultation.
Okay.
But as I say, because we're not talking about sale, we're just talking about an options appraisal. So I don't think there's an issue, but I thought it was just worth highlighting. We have to have a clear separation. Otherwise, we do need to trigger that consultation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we can accept both options and move forward, and they're both viable to do. Are the committee happy with that? Yep. Okay. Fiona, are you quite happy with that for the minute?
Thanks. Yes, that's fine.
Right. Okay. We'll move on to item number 12, Tane Common Good Fund on pages 105 to 111, and there's 3 recommendations there. I don't think there's any additional points to bring up, Helen, from you, is there, in the report?
Just one point, if I might, Chair.
Yep.
Basically, in 5.5, I made reference to the Golf Club Road, and we've got the budget set aside for the works that, and there was just after the papers had been issued, a concern raised that the ownership clarification hadn't included that area of land. So our legal colleagues have done some more checking, and they did get an additional deed because basically the members I know are familiar with this. Just before the end of the Borough Council in 1975, the common good leased the majority of the golf course land to the golf course, and that's still the case. The golf course run it and the common good own it. But actually, just prior to 1975, the golf club had already bought and still own an area of land, and it is southwest of the clubhouse, and it's adjacent to that cemetery wall. So it's almost exactly the area where the works are required. So that is actually owned by the golf course. Having said that, the legal view was clear that because that's the bit that provides the drainage and the access to the rest of the common good land, that there is a clear benefit to the common good and continued works. And I know from Ian Moncrief, I think he's almost ready to continue to let that work. And that's
Can I just interrupt you, Helen, just to say, could we all make sure our mics are on mute, please?
I think it's Pauline.
It is, I know, but I wasn't going to draw attention to that. I was just saying if everybody could please check that they were on mute. Thank you. Thanks, Helen, if you can.
Yeah, so basically it's appropriate to use the common good fund still to do this work because it does benefit the common good, even though some of the work is actually on third-party owned land.
Okay, thanks, Helen, for drawing our attention to that. Derek?
Yep. It's not anything that's in the committee report. It's something that isn't in it, and it's really the investigation of the ownership of the land at Blair Lath, and how that's come to be in the ownership of Highland Council. I'm wondering if there's any update on that. I know that an officer was undertaking work to try and ascertain how the land came to no longer be in the ownership of Tane Common Good Fund, but it does appear to be owned by the Highland Council's various services. So I just wondered whether there was an update on that or what work was currently ongoing to try and progress that.
Helen?
I don't have an update as such, Councillor Loudon, but that work would be undertaken by Sarah Murdoch by and large, and I'm aware from other conversations that I've had with her that she's still very busy going through some of the original common good work. So I can chase it. It's been emailed and been requested, and I can chase that up. But I think she is very busy in other common goods, NEN, for example. And so realistically, I think that timescale isn't going to be particularly quick because obviously it's detailed work and you'll have to go and look for all those deeds and bits of paper.
Yeah, I just want it recorded that that we have requested the work, and if it hasn't progressed, at least hopefully at some point in the future we will get some feedback onto how the land came to move from common good to Highland Council ownership.
Okay, thanks, Derek. That's noted. I think what might be a good idea to put that on as a standing item on our agenda for our ward business meeting, and then it won't get lost. We'll just keep it on there, and every time we come together, we'll see if there's an update. Would you be happy with that?
Yes, maybe it could be included as a regular item on the, the report on the Common Good Fund as well.
Yeah, we could actually.
Yeah, so absolutely. It's a standing item on there until such time as
that we'll report on
progressed and there's a resolution on it. Yeah,
okay,
thanks.
Quite happy with that, Helen. We'll add that into the report.
Yeah, and I'll pop it onto the agendas. I'll email legal colleagues. I mean, it will be a while, but as you say, then it won't be forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. And that just moves us to the final item on the agenda, number 13, the minutes of the Easter Ross Area Committee, which was held on the 18th of November on pages 112 to 119. Is everybody quite happy with that? Okay, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. 1:15, yeah, so we haven't gone on too long. Mark, would you like to speak before the end?
A really quick one. We're now starting to return to having meetings in person, blended. So Redesign tomorrow, I think, is the first one I've got actually back in the chamber. And the first versions of the sort of blended approach will still be the sort of old-fashioned way like you used to do it at council. So if you couldn't turn up in person, you went to an area office and went in through VScene, because I haven't quite yet got Teams fixed so that it works. More for this committee than anything else. By the time we get to the next meeting of this, I'm going to propose that we should probably look to do it in person, as you know, that's going to be 2-3 months away at least at this time. I know people have got different views about how comfortable they feel or don't feel about that. I completely respect that, but it was just to sort of highlight that that's the direction of travel that the convener at least has indicated that he wants to happen. So we just need to have a wee think about that, probably through ward business meeting and in the run up to actually sorting out the logistics of the next committee meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. That's an important point to bring up, yeah, so that we can start the discussions. Derek.
In the old days, before Teams, there used to be an option to phone in if you couldn't get to a council office. Has that option been removed?
I do not know actually, Derek, but I'm hoping that Helen and I, retainers, can have a wee conversation, and we'll try and get to the answer. I'm afraid it's a good question. You put me on the spot there. I don't know the answer.
Helen?
I would suggest I'll add committee venue onto our ward business meeting as well, because obviously there is a requirement at the moment, and I would imagine it'll be there for a little while at least, you know, about risk assessment and ventilation. And because, you know, given the building that we've met in, that's actually frankly a bit of a challenge, and we don't control the entry to it. So I suspect we may need to look at alternative venues. But if we add that to the, I know the business meetings are separate, but that's a place where we can perhaps have some discussion and then come together.
Yeah, good idea.
And share views.
Maxine?
Yeah, in the standing orders for strategic committees and area committees, you can't use the phone link. It can only be video conferencing. So you can't use Teams either. So it would take a change of standing orders, but that's just FYI. But we could meet. I mean, the Dingwall chamber is plenty wide enough for us to social distance. You know, we met in the tourism committee yesterday in the chamber, and everybody kept way apart, and there was screens for the top table. So yeah, I think the Tain chamber would be a challenge at this time, but we could consider Dingwall or another venue, whatever.
Yeah, I think we'll look at all venues at our ward business meetings. I'm not surprised that telephone link, I don't think it's a particularly good idea. I think that's a bit of a backward step. Even with Teams, we do ask if you could please put on your video, especially if there's decisions to be made. I would have concerns about a telephone link. But we will discuss it our next ward business meeting. So thanks for bringing that up, Mark. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you everyone for coming along.